Two Ventaxian females huddle beneath the twisted wreckage of their survey vessel, their crystalline forms refracting the harsh light of three suns that beat down mercilessly on Kepler 186x's desert surface. Zoe presses her translucent hand against the ship's fractured hull, watching helplessly as hairline cracks spread through the crystalline alloys. Beside her, Lyra works frantically at the emergency beacon circuits, but the crash has left it beyond repair. Temperature approaching 42 degrees Celsius, Zoe announces, checking their failing environmental systems. Her voice carries the distinctive chiming resonance of their species. Hull integrity down to 18%. The crash site stretches before them in an endless sea of orange dunes, the nearest outpost a desperate 100 kilometers away. Their life support systems flicker and dim, offering diminishing protection against the heat that threatens to shatter their temperature-sensitive biology. 15 kilometers away, Charles Wright sits at the controls of his mobile atmospheric processing station, frowning at the unusual electromagnetic signatures appearing on his scanner displays. The massive tracked vehicle, a fortress of human engineering designed to withstand the planet's extreme conditions, hums with the steady operation of its atmospheric conversion systems. He knows he should ignore the readings. The recent Proxima Centauri incident, where Ventaxian ships attempted to seize human terraformed worlds, has left diplomatic relations in shambles. Standard protocol demands he report any Ventaxian activity and await official clearance before taking action. The scanner beeps again, more urgently. Surface temperature at the anomaly, 48 degrees Celsius. Charles's jaw tightens as he recalls his xenobiology briefings. Ventaxian crystalline structures begin to break down at 40 degrees. The readings show two distinct biosignatures, both critical. His atmospheric monitoring systems flash a warning: massive sandstorm approaching, due to hit in less than 3 hours. The storm's intensity would destroy any exposed Ventaxian biology, erasing all traces of their existence beneath tons of superheated sand. Charles's fingers hover over the controls. The atmospheric processor carries advanced medical facilities, environmental controls, and more than enough room for survivors. But rendering unauthorized assistance to Ventaxians could end his career, possibly trigger another diplomatic crisis. The scanner beeps again. One of the biosignatures is weakening. "Computer, plot direct course to crash site," Charles commands, engaging the processor's massive drive system. The behemoth vehicle turns, tracks grinding against stone and sand, moving toward the fatting signals. Political consequences be damned, he won't let two people die, not when he has the power to prevent it. The race against time begins, with 3 suns above and a killer storm approaching. Only a human's quick action stands between 2 Ventaxian lives and certain death in the merciless desert of Kepler 186x. Charles's massive atmospheric processor carved through the dunes, its reinforced tracks churning orange sand. Inside the Climatech-controlled cabin, his fingers danced across control panels, activating emergency protocols. Warning indicators flashed as the vehicle's systems reconfigured for rescue operations. "Initiating emergency pressurization," the computer announced. Metal shutters slid into place across the viewport with pneumatic hisses. The habitat module's environmental systems hummed to life, preparing a sanctuary against the brutal heat outside. The medical bay's displays cast blue light across Charles's face as he accessed the xenobiology database. "Computer, adjust cooling systems for Ventaxian physiology. Set temperature to 15 degrees Celsius." The medical pod's internal temperature dropped rapidly as frost crystallized on its surfaces. Ground-penetrating radar mapped the terrain ahead, revealing unstable sand pockets and hidden rock formations. Charles guided the processor along a winding path of stable ground, each second measured against the weakening biosignatures on his scanner. The processor crested a final dune, and Charles's breath caught. The Ventaxian ship sprawled across the sand like a shattered diamond. Its onsilegant crystal hull had split down its spine, emergency shelter panels warped and running like molten glass. The cargo hold remained partially intact, a dim haven where two heat signatures flickered dangerously. External temperature 51 degrees Celsius, the computer reported. Sandstorm approaching vector 270, estimated arrival 1 hour 42 minutes. Charles positioned the processor to shield the crash site, watching storm clouds build on the horizon, a towering wall of orange static and fury. He extended the vehicle's manipulator arms, usually reserved for maintaining atmospheric conversion equipment. The articulated appendages moved with precision through the crystalline debris field. Each piece of wreckage required careful extraction. Too much pressure would shatter the heat-stressed crystal, sending deadly shards in all directions. Charles lifted a twisted panel, microscopic fractures spreading beneath the manipulator's grip. His scanners showed the Ventaxian's vital signs deteriorating rapidly, microfractures developing in their cellular structure. Life signs critical, the computer warned. Estimated biological breakdown in 28 minutes. Wind gusts buffeted the processor as the storm's leading edge reached them. Sand particles pinged against the hull, complicating the already delicate operation. Charles adjusted the manipulator's sensitivity, compensating for the crosswinds as he cleared the final obstacles between his vehicle and the cargo hold. The external cameras revealed Zoe and Lyra huddled in the dimness, their crystalline forms developing visible stress patterns. Their environmental systems had failed completely, leaving them exposed to the rising heat. Without immediate evacuation, their bodies would literally shatter. Charles extended the processor's boarding tunnel, its rubber seals pressing against the cargo hold's fractured hull. He activated the emergency extraction protocols, ready to receive the Ventaxian survivors into the waiting sanctuary of his vessel's medical bay. Hot wind howled across the desert as the storm drew closer, and time ran out with each grain of sand that struck the processor's armored hull. Charles activated the processor's electromagnetic field as crystalline particles filled the air, their razor-sharp edges glinting in the harsh sunlight. The manipulator arms moved with surgical precision through the wreckage, clearing a path to the cargo hold millimeter by millimeter. Each piece of debris required delicate handling. Too much pressure would send lethal crystal shards flying in all directions. The external temperature display flashed, 53 degrees Celsius. Wind rattled against the processor's hull as the storm's advance guard reached them. Through the external cameras, Charles watched the horizon darken with approaching clouds of orange dust. Warning. Crystalline contamination detected, the computer announced. Activating hazard containment protocols. The electromagnetic field hummed louder, trapping the dangerous particles in a shimmering curtain around the work area. Charles guided the plasma cutter through the melted access hatch, its blue flame carving through heat-warped crystal. The new opening revealed Zoe and Lyra crouched within a failing temperature control unit. Their translucent forms had developed web-like patterns of stress fractures. The characteristic blue glow of their species had dimmed to barely visible pinpoints of light. Charles's medical scanner displayed their core temperatures far into the critical zone. Deploying emergency evacuation tunnel, Charles said. The insulated corridor extended from the processor's medical bay, its cooling system straining against the brutal heat. Inside the medical bay, two cooling pods prepared for emergency xenobiological intervention, their surfaces already rimed with frost. A massive gust slammed into the processor, rocking it on its stabilizing tracks. The Ventaxian ship groaned, its remaining support structure swaying dangerously. Warning indicators flashed across Charles's displays as the cargo hold's integrity dropped into single digits. Hull collapse imminent, the computer warned. Structural failure in approximately 3 minutes. Charles split his attention between three urgent tasks. The manipulator arms braced critical support beams, while the evacuation tunnel maintained position against the wind, and the medical systems prepared for immediate intervention. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he worked the controls. Through the cameras, he watched Zoe and Lyra struggle to move toward the tunnel. Their movements were jerky, uncoordinated, clear signs of severe crystalline degradation. They wouldn't make it on their own. "Computer, detach primary manipulator maintenance tool," Charles ordered. He quickly accessed the external storage controls, retrieving a medical transport basket. The improvised rescue cradle took shape as he attached the components, testing the connections under the increasing wind load. Surface sensors registered debris impacts against the processor's shields as the storm intensified. The massive vehicle's stabilizers whined, fighting to maintain position as dust clouds reduced visibility to near zero. "Storm front arrival in 28 minutes, the computer updated. Shield capacity at 87% and declining. Charles guided the rescue cradle into the cargo hold. Zoe's crystalline form glinted weakly as he carefully lifted her into the basket. The medical scanner showed cascading failures throughout her cellular structure. She had minutes at most before total breakdown. A thunderous explosion rocked the crash site. New alarms blared as the ship's power core began to destabilize, its housing warped by the extreme heat. Energy readings spiked dangerously on Charles's instruments. "Power core critical," the computer reported. "Containment failure in 4 minutes, 12 seconds. Blast radius calculation, 100 meters. Current shield configuration insufficient for combined storm and explosion protection." The rescue cradle carried Zoe through the evacuation tunnel with agonizing slowness. Her vital signs fluctuated wildly on the medical display. Behind her, Lyra's readings grew weaker by the second. The storm's leading edge threw sand and debris against the processor with increasing violence. Time compressed into a razor's edge as Charles worked to save both Ventaxians before the power core detonated. The processor's shields flickered under the assault of wind-driven crystal shards, while the evacuation tunnel's cooling system struggled to maintain life-sustaining temperatures. Above it all, 3 merciless suns continued to beat down on the desperate rescue operation. Charles activated the rescue cradle's rapid extraction protocols as Zoe's vital signs continued to deteriorate. The medical display showed fracture patterns spreading across her crystalline form like spider webs through ice. The cooling systems whirred at maximum capacity, creating a protective envelope of cold air around her fragile structure. "Medical Pod 1 online," the computer announced. Temperature optimal for Ventaxian physiology. The rescue cradle glided through the evacuation tunnel with practiced precision. Charles monitored Zoe's biosignatures as microfractures propagated through her cellular matrix. The medical pod's frost-covered surfaces beckoned, promising sanctuary from the killing heat. A burst of radiation from the failing power core washed over the sensor arrays. The manipulator arms jerked, their precision servos struggling against the electromagnetic interference. "Warning, control systems compromised," the computer reported. Switching to manual override. Charles's hands moved to the manual controls, fingers wrapping around familiar grips. The arms responded sluggishly but steadily as he guided them back toward Lyra. Wind-driven sand pelted the processor's hull with increasing fury as the storm front arrived in full force. The external cameras showed only swirling orange clouds punctuated by crystalline debris. Visibility dropped to near zero as the processor's powerful floodlights barely penetrated the maelstrom. The vehicle's stabilizers groaned against the savage crosswinds. A thunderous crack echoed through the comm system as another section of the cargo hold gave way. Charles watched in horror as a support beam crashed down, pinning Lyra beneath its crystalline mass. Her biosignatures spiked erratically on his displays. Structural integrity critical, the computer warned. Additional load may trigger complete collapse. Charles's fingers flew across the control panel, activating emergency protocols. The processor's auxiliary power core hummed to life, channeling energy into the electromagnetic containment field. A shimmering bubble expanded around the crash site, temporarily halting the crystalline structure's degradation. Power core detonation in 15 minutes, the computer updated. Shield capacity at 60% and falling. The external temperature reading flashed, 55 degrees Celsius. Charles diverted power from non-essential systems, reinforcing the evacuation tunnel's cooling units. In the medical bay, Zoe's reading stabilized within the frost-rimmed pod, though damage indicators still crowded the display. Lyra's vital signs painted a dire picture: her core temperature, rising faster than Zoe's had, cellular breakdown accelerating from the beam's crushing weight. The radiation pulses from the power core grew stronger, interfering with the processor's sensitive instruments. Charles initiated a controlled deconstruction sequence, using the manipulator arms to carefully dismantle sections of the cargo hold's outer shell. Each piece required exact positioning to prevent further collapse. The radiation spikes complicated the delicate operation, forcing him to adjust his movements with each pulse. The storm's intensity doubled, then tripled. Debris slammed against the processor's shields with concrete-wrecking force. The massive vehicle swayed on its tracks despite the stabilization system's best efforts. "Deploy ground clamps," Charles ordered. Massive hydraulic anchors drove deep into the bedrock beneath the sand, locking the processor in place against the storm's fury. The decision carried its own risk. Once Lyra was aboard, they'd have precious little time to clear the power core's blast radius. The cargo hold's structural integrity dropped to critical levels as Charles removed the final outer panel. Lyra's biosignatures flickered weakly on his displays. The beam pinning her shifted slightly as the winds battered the wreckage. Above the howling storm and groaning metal, a new sound cut through the processor's hull: the high-pitched whine of the power core's containment system approaching catastrophic failure. The radiation peaks grew stronger, threatening to overwhelm the processor's shielding despite the auxiliary power core's support. With time running out, Charles faced the final, most dangerous phase of the rescue. The beam had to be moved without bringing down what remained of the cargo hold, while protecting Lyra's critically damaged crystalline structure from both the heat and the storm's violence. The processor's systems calculated multiple approach vectors, each carrying its own risks as the sandstorm raged, and the power core counted down to detonation. Charles's gaze darted between the structural analysis displays and Lyra's weakening vital signs. The beam crushing her crystalline form had to be moved, but any wrong calculation would bring the entire cargo hold down around them. His fingers flew across the engineering interface as an idea crystallized. "Computer, reconfigure ground clamp protocols," he ordered. "Convert to hydraulic lift configuration." The processor's massive stabilizing clamps responded, their systems accepting the new parameters. Charles plotted precise lift points beneath the wreckage, the computer highlighting optimal positions where the forces could be distributed without triggering a cascade failure. A sudden radiation surge from the power core washed over the sensors, temporarily blinding the external cameras. Warning indicators flashed across his displays as systems began to fail under the intense radiation. Charles accessed the processor's backup coolant controls. "Reroute emergency coolant to power core containment field." The system protested, flashing warnings about operating outside design parameters, but complied. Frost crept across the external cameras as supercooled gas flooded the area around the failing core. The sandstorm reached full fury, battering the processor with winds that topped 200 kilometers per hour. Crystal shards pinged against the shields with increasing force. Power readings dropped precipitously as the shield generators strained against the assault. Diverting power from artificial gravity, Charles announced. His stomach lurched as the gravity plating powered down. He grabbed the control console for stability as loose items began floating around the cabin. The shield strength indicators stabilized, but now every movement required careful calculation to avoid drifting off course. The hydraulic system hummed to life. Charles watched the structural integrity displays as the ground clamps extended beneath the wreckage, creating a web of support points. Millimeter by millimeter, the crushing beam began to rise. Lyra's vital signs fluctuated wildly as the pressure on her crystalline form decreased. A massive radiation spike surged through the crash site. The primary control system sparked and died, leaving Charles with only the manual backup controls. His hands wrapped around the mechanical linkages, muscle memory taking over as he guided the rescue cradle into position beneath Lyra's no-freed form. The medical scanner painted a grim picture. Crystalline fractures covered nearly every surface of her body, spreading like frost across a window. Her core temperature continued to rise despite the evacuation tunnel's cooling systems operating at maximum capacity. Charles engaged the rescue cradle's retrieval sequence, watching as it inched through the howling storm with its precious cargo. The power core's radiation levels spiked again and again, each pulse stronger than the last. The mechanical controls juddered in his grip as he fought to maintain steady movement. The second cooling pod activated as Lyra cleared the evacuation tunnel, its surfaces already rimed with protective frost. Charles sealed her inside just as the power core entered its final destabilization sequence. The processor's engines roared to life, massive tracks spinning against the sand as he retracted the ground clamps and tunnel. Calculating optimal escape vector, the computer announced. Charles plotted a course that would keep the processor's armored rear between the impending explosion and his patients. The vehicle's massive bulk fought against the storm winds as they accelerated away from the crash site. The power core detonated with earth-shattering force. The shockwave slammed into the processor like a physical blow, sending Charles tumbling in the zero-gravity environment. Warning klaxons blared as the rear shields collapsed. The electromagnetic pulse from the blast rolled over them, plunging the cabin into darkness before emergency power restored essential systems. The medical bay's dedicated generators maintained power to the cooling pods, keeping both Ventaxians in stable hibernation. Their vital signs still showed critical damage, but the immediate threat of crystalline breakdown had been halted. Charles plotted a course through the heart of the storm toward his main facility, knowing that every minute counted in the race to get his patients to advanced medical care. Through the swirling orange chaos outside, the processor's floodlights illuminated curtains of crystalline debris that sparkled like diamond rain. The vehicle's tracks carved deep furrows in the sand as they pressed on through the maelstrom. In the medical bay, frost patterns danced across the cooling pod surfaces, preserving the lives within against the desert's killing heat. The processor's navigation display flickered, static crawling across the screen as Charles checked their heading. The power core's detonation had created an expanding electromagnetic anomaly that corrupted the primary guidance systems. He switched to ground-penetrating radar, watching ghostly terrain features materialize through layers of wind-blown sand. A harsh tone cut through the cabin. The medical bay's monitoring system displayed a cascade of warnings: crystalline degradation spreading through both patients' cellular matrices. Zoe's diagnostics showed fracture patterns across 65% of her structure. Lyra's readings painted an even grimmer picture: 85% structural compromise. The medical computer's assessment scrolled across his screen: critical cellular deterioration. Specialized treatment required within 48 hours to prevent complete structural failure. Charles accessed the emergency medical database, scanning treatment options for crystalline-based life forms. The nearest qualified facility was Proxima Medical Center at New Darwin Station. The diplomatic clearances alone would take days they didn't have. The communications array crackled with incoming signals. Through bursts of static, he detected Ventaxian search vessels entering the system. Human border patrol ships moved to intercept, their tracking signatures converging above the atmosphere. The processor's sensors mapped a massive dune field ahead, ground radar showing unstable formations that could swallow the vehicle whole. Charles plotted an alternate route around the hazard, adding 80 kilometers but following more stable terrain. The new course led through a region of thermal vents, their heat signatures blazing on infrared. Power indicators dropped into the yellow zone. The cooling pods drew massive energy, straining the processor's reserves. At current consumption rates, the power cells would fail before reaching their destination. Charles moved through the zero-gravity environment to the atmospheric processing units. He disconnected coolant lines and power couplings, repurposing the components into auxiliary cooling systems for the medical bay. The modification reduced the strain on the primary units, but left the processor's interior in perpetual freefall. A critical alert blared from the medical bay. The beam damage to Lyra's lower body had triggered a cascading breakdown in her crystalline structure. The computer projected total systemic failure within 6 hours without intervention. Charles pushed off the bulkhead, propelling himself to the medical bay. He activated the molecular imaging system, studying the spreading fracture patterns. The cooling pod's temperature dropped another 10 degrees as he diverted additional power to the containment field. The processors tracked ground through mineral-crusted sand as Charles steered them between towering plumes of superheated gas. External temperature readings spiked with each passing vent. He adjusted their course, threading through the thermal maze while monitoring the cooling pod's status. The ground radar mapped a relatively stable path ahead, weaving between the worst of the heat zones. Charles calculated power consumption rates against their remaining charge. Even with the artificial gravity disabled, they'd need at least one power cell replacement before reaching the outpost. Lyra's vital signs fluctuated as another fracture spread through her crystalline matrix. Charles accessed the processor's fabrication systems, programming them to produce molecular binding compounds. The experimental treatment might slow the degradation until they reached proper medical facilities. The storm's fury increased, visibility dropping to zero as the processor relied entirely on sensor guidance. Through the swirling chaos, the vehicle pressed onward toward Research Outpost 47, where salvation or at least temporary stabilization waited in the form of Dr. Taylor's molecular reconstruction equipment. Charles initiated the fabrication sequence for the binding compounds, watching as crystalline structures grew in the processor's synthesis chamber. The medical computer began calculating application protocols as the first batch neared completion. Outside, another thermal vent erupted, bathing the processor's shields in waves of scorching heat. Charles checked the latest ground-penetrating radar scan, his attention caught by an anomalous reading beneath the thermal vents. The scan revealed a network of ancient lava tubes stretching for kilometers through the bedrock, their hollow channels maintaining temperatures significantly cooler than the surface. A harsh tone from the medical bay interrupted his analysis. The cooling pod's diagnostics displayed a critical warning: Lyra's lower body had begun to disintegrate, crystalline fragments breaking down at the molecular level. Computer, full structural analysis of patient's crystalline matrix, Charles ordered, pushing off toward the engineering bay. The molecular imaging system projected a three-dimensional model of Lyra's deteriorating form. Fracture patterns radiated outward from the impact points, spreading like cracks through ice. He accessed the processor's fabrication systems, studying the crystalline filter arrays used in atmospheric processing. The array's molecular structure bore striking similarities to Ventaxian biology. Charles extracted several filter sections, reconfiguring the fabrication unit to create a supporting framework. Initiating molecular resonance scan, he announced, calibrating the binding field generator. The medical computer overlaid frequency patterns from Lyra's remaining stable sections. Charles adjusted the field strength in microscopic increments, watching the fracture propagation rates on his display. The binding field pulsed. Crystalline structures in the test sample aligned, their molecular bonds strengthening. Charles transferred the calibration data to the fabrication unit, beginning production of the support framework. His communications panel lit up with an incoming transmission. Through bursts of static, a stern voice cut through. Atmospheric Processor 7 Delta 9, this is Commander Sullivan of Border Patrol Cruiser Vigilant. Respond immediately. Charles glanced at the long-range scanner. Multiple vessels had entered orbit, the angular shapes of human patrol ships intermixed with the organic curves of Ventaxian craft. Their weapons systems remained powered, energy readings fluctuating as they maneuvered. The fabrication unit chimed. Charles retrieved the completed framework, its crystalline lattice glowing faintly. He guided the structure into Lyra's cooling pod, manipulating the molecular binder's field to merge the support frame with her damaged sections. Warning: geological instability detected, the computer announced. The ground radar showed thermal stress fractures spreading through the cavern system. Several passages had already collapsed, their outlines fading from the scan. Charles plotted a route through the remaining stable sections. The underground path would cut hours off their journey time, but one wrong move could bring tons of rock down on the processor. He checked the power readings even with his modifications. The cooling pods would fail before they reached the outpost via the surface route. A flash of movement caught his eye. Zoe's cooling pod emitted a soft blue glow as her crystalline form pulsed with bioluminescence. The medical sensors registered increased stability in her molecular structure. Commander Sullivan's voice crackled through the comm again. 7 Delta 9, failure to respond will be considered noncompliance with border authority. Your location has been traced. Stand by for boarding. Charles disabled the communications array. The processors tracked ground against rock as he aligned them with the cavern entrance, ancient stone arching overhead. The vehicle's floodlights illuminated mineral formations that hadn't seen light in millennia. The medical bay's cooling systems hummed more quietly in the cavern's relative cold. Charles watched the structural integrity displays as they moved deeper underground, each meter bringing them closer to either salvation or catastrophe. Above, the gathering fleets would find only electromagnetic static where his signal had been, while below, the processor carried its critical cargo through the planet's ancient veins. Lyra's vital signs stabilized as the binding frame took hold. The medical computer calculated a 42% reduction in crystalline deterioration. In the adjacent pod, Zoe's bioluminescence pulsed steadily, like a beacon leading them forward through the underground darkness. Charles accessed the processor's encrypted communications array one final time, transmitting a brief coded burst to Research Outpost 47. Inbound. 2 critical Ventaxian patients. Prepare molecular reconstruction equipment. See, the message sent. He disabled all communication systems and angled the massive vehicle toward the cavern mouth. The processor's suspension groaned as Charles adjusted the hydraulic systems to handle the steep descent. Darkness swallowed them as they passed beneath the ancient stone arch, illuminated only by the vehicle's powerful floodlights. The ground radar painted a ghostly map of the tunnel network ahead, a maze of interconnecting passages carved by prehistoric lava flows. Environmental analysis complete, the computer announced. Ambient temperature, -15 degrees Celsius. detecting minimal thermal vent activity in primary passage. A soft chime drew his attention to the medical bay displays. Zoe's vitals showed an unexpected shift. Her damaged crystalline matrix had begun knitting itself back together in several locations. The medical computer's analysis scrolled across his screen. Patient exhibits autonomous molecular regeneration in regions of moderate damage. Environmental temperature appears to catalyze natural healing processes. Charles studied the readings, then adjusted the cooling pod's temperature controls to match the cavern's natural gradient. Power indicators steadied as the reduced external temperature decreased the cooling load. He redirected the excess capacity to enhance the molecular regeneration field surrounding both pods. The processor's tracks crunched through mineral deposits as Charles guided them deeper into the tunnel system. Ground radar highlighted structural weaknesses in the rock overhead, ancient pillars weakened by centuries of thermal stress. He engaged the vehicle's stabilizers, dampening the vibrations that could trigger a collapse. A harsh buzz cut through the cabin. Warning. Power cell 3 compromised. Detecting coolant leak. Charles pulled up the diagnostic display, revealing a hairline crack spiderwebbing across the cell's containment housing. The damage pattern matched the force signature from the power core detonation. He initiated emergency shutdown procedures for the failing cell, watching power levels drop by a quarter. In the medical bay, Lyra's scaffold monitoring system flashed urgent warnings. The molecular binding field fluctuated as reduced power degraded the frequency controls. Fracture patterns began spreading through the crystalline framework. Computer, analyze cavern wall composition, Charles ordered, studying the mineral formations illuminated by the floodlights. The results confirmed his suspicion. The walls contained crystalline structures remarkably similar to Ventaxian biology. He deployed the processor's mineral extraction arms, originally designed to harvest catalysts for atmospheric conversion. The mechanical appendages extended from the vehicle's sides, carefully extracting samples from the cavern walls. Charles fed the crystalline material into the fabrication unit, programming it to process the minerals into compatible replacement segments for Lyra's deteriorating scaffold. The first batch of synthesized crystals emerged from the fabrication chamber. Charles examined their molecular structure through the imaging system, nearly identical to the original scaffold, but with improved stability in the current environmental conditions. A low rumble vibrated through the processor's hull as they approached a narrow section of tunnel. The ground radar showed a precarious stack of fallen rocks partially blocking their path. Charles engaged the auxiliary floodlights, illuminating a gap barely wider than the processor's chassis. The fabrication unit chimed again as the second batch of replacement segments completed processing. In the medical bay, Lyra's vital signs wavered. The original scaffold's frequency misalignment had worsened, requiring immediate replacement of the compromised sections. Charles initiated the delicate process of threading the massive vehicle through the tunnel constriction while simultaneously monitoring the fabrication unit and both patients' status displays. Stones scraped against the processor's armored sides as they inched forward. Overhead, centuries-old rock groaned under its own weight. The passive sensor array registered increased activity in orbit, multiple ships moving in search patterns across the planet's surface. Their sensor sweeps passed harmlessly over the kilometers of rock, sheltering the processor from detection. The replacement scaffold segments waited in the fabrication chamber as Charles concentrated on clearing the narrow passage. The medical computer continued its careful monitoring of both patients, their crystalline forms glowing softly in the dimness of the underground cavern system. Ahead, the ground radar mapped their path through the planet's ancient arteries, leading them towards salvation at Research Outpost 47. The ground radar's display flickered as new fracture patterns emerged in the surrounding rock. Charles reduced the processor's speed, watching stress indicators climb across multiple sections of the cavern ceiling. Each rotation of the vehicle's tracks sent minute vibrations through the ancient stone. The fabrication unit's completion tone drew his attention. Charles directed the medical manipulators with precise movements, guiding the first batch of synthesized scaffold segments into position around Lyra's damaged sections. The molecular binding field pulsed as the new crystals merged with her existing structure. Status readings showed a 15% improvement in stability across the treated areas. A soft glow emanated from the second cooling pod. Zoe's eyes opened, her crystalline form refracting the pod's monitoring lights. The medical sensors registered increasing coherence in her neural patterns as she regained consciousness. Her vital signs strengthened in the cavern's natural cold. Environmental alert, the computer announced, detecting high-density crystalline deposits in adjacent chamber. Molecular analysis indicates 92% compatibility with Ventaxian cellular structure. Charles studied the scan results. The crystal formation's atomic arrangement nearly mirrored Ventaxian biology. These weren't just replacement parts, they were raw materials for actual regeneration. The chamber housing them sat nestled against an active thermal vent, heat rippling through the scanner's imaging. He accessed the processor's engineering systems, redistributing the atmospheric filters to create cooling barriers around critical components. The external harvesting arms accepted additional heat shielding stripped from secondary systems. Temperature warnings flashed as the modified equipment moved into position. The damaged power cell's monitoring system displayed accelerating deterioration. Coolant levels dropped steadily as the crack widened. Charles activated the backup power distribution network, watching available energy reserves dwindle. The medical bay's critical systems consumed most of the remaining capacity. The processor's atmospheric catalysts caught his attention. Their molecular structure could theoretically convert thermal energy into usable power. Charles reprogrammed the fabrication unit, reconfiguring the catalysts into an experimental energy transfer system. He installed the modified components, connecting them to the power grid. Warning klaxons blared as the new system activated. Power readings fluctuated wildly before stabilizing at 127% of previous capacity. The conversion matrix channeled excess heat from the thermal vent into the processor's energy cells. Zoe's voice came weakly through the medical bay's comm. "The crystals. They sing to us. Ancient pieces of home." Charles checked her vitals. Her self-repair mechanisms had stabilized, providing valuable data about natural Ventaxian healing processes. He adjusted Lyra's treatment protocols to match the optimal pattern shown in Zoe's readings. The seismic sensors pulsed with new warnings. Stress fractures spread through the surrounding rock like growing frost. The processor's floodlights illuminated falling dust and debris as the cavern network grew increasingly unstable. Time ebbed away with each new crack forming in the ancient stone. Charles guided the harvesting arms toward the crystal deposits, their reinforced joints glowing dully from the thermal vent's proximity. The experimental power system hummed as it converted the intense heat into energy. Every system reading sat at the edge of acceptable tolerances as the processor prepared to extract the vital crystalline material that could save Lyra's life if the cavern held together long enough to reach it. Charles activated the modified harvesting arms, their reinforced joints glowing orange as they extended into the superheated chamber. The experimental power transfer system hummed to life, its readings climbing rapidly past expected parameters. Energy conversion efficiency reached 143% as the thermal vent's heat transformed into usable power, feeding both the collection operation and medical systems. The processor's sensors detected an unexpected resonance emanating from the crystal deposits. Charles studied the frequency analysis with growing interest. The pattern matched Ventaxian biological signatures with unprecedented precision. The computer's assessment scrolled across his screen. Crystal formation conditions correlate with environmental data from Ventaxian historical records. He adjusted the fabrication unit's processing matrices, programming new parameters to preserve the natural resonance. The first extracted crystal segments emerged from the chamber, their structure pristine despite the intense heat exposure. A harsh screech cut through the cabin. Coolant pressure warnings flashed red across the engineering display as the damaged power cell's containment system began to rupture. The leak rate tripled in seconds, radioactive coolant pooling in the lower maintenance compartments. Emergency containment protocols engaged, the computer announced. Sealing affected sections, rerouting critical systems through backup circuits. The processor's drive system power dropped to 40% as Charles sealed off the contaminated areas. Their already slow progress through the cavern network reduced to a crawl. He diverted every spare watt to the medical bay and crystal processing systems. In the cooling pod, Lyra's scaffold accepted the first resonant crystal grafts. Her vital signs strengthened as the compatible material integrated with her damaged matrix. The medical sensors registered a 47% improvement in cellular cohesion within minutes. The crystals respond to our core frequency. Zoe's voice came through the medical bay calm, stronger now. They formed in conditions like the deep caves of home. She transmitted detailed biological data through her pod's interface, allowing Charles to fine-tune the integration process. The ground radar's display filled with spreading fracture patterns. Support columns throughout the chamber showed critical stress levels as heat from the thermal vent weakened the ancient stone. A new warning caught Charles's attention. The sensors detected an enormous pressure buildup in a nearby magma pocket. Structural integrity decreasing, the computer reported. Chamber collapse probable within 197 hours. Charles accelerated the harvesting operation, pushing the modified collection arms to their thermal limits. The fabrication unit processed crystal segments in continuous cycles, each batch precisely calibrated to match Lyra's biological patterns. Her vital signs improved steadily as the new material knit into her damaged sections. The processor's hull groaned as stone fragments pelted its armored exterior. Overhead, a massive crack split the chamber's ceiling. The ground radar displayed 3 potential escape routes, each passing through progressively unstable sections of the cavern network. Warning: magma pocket pressure exceeding safety threshold, the computer announced, detecting increased seismic activity. Inside her cooling pod, Lyra's crystalline form began to pulse with renewed energy. The medical computer projected full consciousness restoration within 6 hours, assuming they could harvest enough compatible material before the cavern's collapse. The damaged power cell's monitoring system screamed new alerts. Charles watched the coolant level indicators drop as radioactive liquid filled another sealed compartment. The processor's reduced operational capacity forced him to choose between maintaining optimal medical conditions and powering the crystal extraction process. He split the difference, letting the cooling pod's temperature rise slightly while keeping the harvesting arms at maximum efficiency. The experimental power system converted another surge of thermal energy, its output fluctuating as the vent's activity intensified. A deep rumble shook the chamber. The ceiling crack widened, releasing a shower of crystalline fragments. The processor's forward sensors mapped the deteriorating tunnel network, calculating optimal paths through the collapsing passages. Above, orbital scan patterns intensified as surface forces searched for their signal. Charles adjusted the collection arm's trajectory, targeting the richest crystal deposits while the chamber still held. The fabrication unit continued its precise work, transforming raw crystal into life-saving scaffold material. In her pod, Lyra's vital signs strengthened with each new integration, racing against the cavern's accelerating collapse. The ground radar painted a grim picture of their surroundings. Major support structures failed one by one as the thermal vent's heat weakened the ancient stone. The magma pocket's pressure readings climbed toward critical levels, threatening to transform their underground sanctuary into a tomb of molten rock. The magma pocket's pressure readings spiked into the red zone. Charles activated the harvesting arm's emergency protocols, their servo motors whining as they accelerated to maximum speed. The resonant crystals flowed into the collection hoppers in a continuous stream, while chunks of ceiling crashed against the processor's armored hull. Initiating emergency extraction sequence, the computer announced. Structural supports failing in sections 12 through 17. A harsh screech pierced the cabin as the damaged power cell's containment system reached critical status. Radioactive coolant flooded the sealed compartments, threatening to contaminate essential systems. The radiation warning indicators painted the control panels in crimson light. Charles accessed the power management controls. Computer, begin power cell ejection sequence. Warning, ejection will reduce total power capacity to 48%. Confirm command. Confirmed. He activated the staged ejection process. The processor shuddered as mechanical clamps released the compromised cell. Emergency bulkhead sealed, protecting vital components as the cell dropped away. The fabrication unit processed the final crystal batches while Charles studied the ground radar display. A previously hidden vertical shaft appeared in the scan data, a natural chimney carved by ancient volcanic activity. The shaft intersected their position, offering a direct route to the surface. Zoe, we're going to attempt a vertical climb. The processor wasn't designed for this steep an angle. The thermal conversion matrix, Zoe responded, her voice stronger. Route additional power through the experimental system. The magma pocket ruptured with a deafening crack. Molten rock sprayed into the lower cavern levels as Charles engaged the climbing protocols. The processor's massive tracks gripped the shaft walls while stabilizing struts extended to brace against the stone. Emergency klaxons blared as the vehicle tilted to a 75-degree angle. Metal groaned under the extreme forces. The power management system displayed cascading failures across non-essential components. Transferring medical bay control, Zoe transmitted. Implementing Ventaxian emergency protocols. The experimental power system surged as pressure waves from the magma breach intensified the thermal vent's output. Energy readings spiked to 131% capacity. Charles directed the extra power to the drive systems, feeling the processor accelerate upward through the shaft. Lyra's vital signs stabilized at 72% integrity as the final crystal integration completed. The cooling pod's monitoring lights reflected off her strengthening crystalline form while the vehicle climbed higher. Stone fragments pelted the hull like metallic rain. The shaft's walls crumbled around them, structural integrity decreasing with each meter gained. 200 meters of rock separated them from the surface and potential confrontation with the search parties above. The processor's drive motors screamed as they pushed beyond design limits. Secondary systems failed in rapid succession. Hydraulic lines ruptured, spraying fluid across maintenance compartments. The backup power distribution network collapsed, leaving only the experimental thermal converter to sustain critical functions. Shaft integrity decreasing, the computer warned. Multiple fracture patterns detected in surrounding rock matrix. Charles diverted emergency power to the structural reinforcement fields. The processor's frame flexed as it absorbed the increasing strain. Rolling waves of magma filled the cavern below, their heat registering on the few remaining functional sensors. The surface beckoned above tantalizingly close, yet still beyond reach as the ancient shaft began to collapse around them. A thunderous crack echoed through the shaft as the processor's starboard stabilizing strut gave way. Metal shrieked against stone as the massive vehicle lurched sideways, its tracks losing purchase on the vertical walls. Warning indicators flooded the control panels as the processor tilted precariously. Compensating for strut failure, Charles announced, his fingers flying across the engineering controls. Emergency power surged through the remaining stabilizers, their servo motors whining as they extended further to counter the dangerous list. Heat bloomed from below as magma filled the lower chamber. The temperature sensors spiked into critical ranges, particularly in the medical bay. Charles watched the environmental readings with growing concern as they climbed past acceptable parameters for Ventaxian biology. Shifting power to medical environmental systems, he transmitted to Zoe. Temperature stabilization is priority. The processor's hull vibrated as Charles shut down non-essential electrical systems. Lighting dimmed to emergency levels. Maintenance systems went dark. Every spare watt flowed to the cooling units, fighting to maintain the delicate temperature balance Zoe and Lyra required. A series of explosions rocked the shaft as magma met underground water pockets. Steam burst upward in scalding clouds. The processor's frame groaned under the assault, support beams buckling from the combined pressure of the vertical climb and seismic shockwaves. Structural integrity at 43%, the computer reported. Complete failure projected in 7 minutes at current ascent angle. Charles studied the atmospheric processing controls, an idea forming. He reconfigured the ventilation systems, revering the primary intakes. Pressurized air blasted downward, creating a cushion beneath the processor's massive bulk. The improvised pneumatic support reduced the strain on the failing structure while providing additional upward thrust. Power levels dropped further as the modified systems drained the reserves. In the medical bay, Lyra's scaffold containment field fluctuated dangerously. The crystalline matrix supporting her damaged areas required constant power to maintain molecular cohesion. "Zoe, can you stabilize the scaffold field?" Charles asked, watching the medical readings flutter. "Attempting to compensate," she responded. "My systems show 78% restoration. Lyra remains critical. Any power interruption could shatter the integration bonds." The processor's sensors detected new instabilities above. The shaft walls displayed an ominous spiral pattern of stress fractures near the surface exit. Chunks of rock broke free, smashing against the vehicle's armor. The entire escape route threatened to seal itself as the rising magma pressure pushed against weakened stone. Charles assessed their options as more warning indicators demanded attention. Their current ascent speed wouldn't clear the shaft before collapse. Pushing the systems harder risked total power failure. The scaffold supporting Lyra's damaged crystal structure would shatter if the medical bay lost power for even a moment. He accessed the atmospheric processor's core functions, initiating an emergency reconfiguration. The massive intake vents reversed polarity, transforming into makeshift vertical thrusters. Compressed air roared through the modified systems with devastating force. "All personnel, brace for maximum acceleration," Charles transmitted. Attempting emergency thrust procedure. The processor's hull shuddered as concentrated air blast propelled them upward at increasing speed. Power fluctuated wildly across all systems. The medical bay's environmental controls struggled to maintain stability as more energy diverted to the improvised thrusters. Surface scans detected multiple vessels converging on their position, both human and Ventaxian signatures. The shaft's upper section crumbled faster as they approached, massive rocks breaking free and plummeting past the straining processor. Charles kept his focus on the environmental controls, carefully balancing power between the thrust system and medical bay. Lyra's scaffold field maintained cohesion by the thinnest margins as they climbed. The processor's remaining structural support groaned under forces far beyond design specifications. 100 meters remained to the surface. The sensor display filled with approaching vessels, while the shaft collapsed behind them in a cascade of stone and rising magma. Charles engaged the atmospheric processor's final modifications. The intake vents reversed with a thunderous roar, transforming into makeshift thrusters. Compressed air blasted downward through the modified systems, propelling the massive vehicle upward with brutal force. Metal screamed as support beams twisted under loads far beyond their design limits. The structural integrity display dropped to 31% as the processor accelerated through the narrowing shaft. Warning indicators flashed across every console as power cells pushed past maximum output levels. The first glimpse of daylight appeared above as the processor's forward section breached the surface. Sunlight pierced the swirling dust, creating shifting patterns across the control panels. Their victory proved short-lived as tons of rock crashed down on the vehicle's rear section. The massive weight threatened to drag them back into the collapsing shaft. Charles diverted emergency power to the forward drive tracks. The processor's wheels spun, grinding against stone as they fought for purchase. The combination of track power and thruster force slowly pulled their bulk onto solid ground. The sensor display lit up with multiple contacts. 3 Ventaxian medical ships held position in low orbit, their distinctive crystalline hulls refracting the desert sunlight. 4 human border patrol cruisers maintained an opposing formation above. Ground vehicles from Research Outpost 47 approached from the east, their signatures partially obscured by the weakened sandstorm. Systems failed in rapid succession as the emergency modifications took their toll. Drive motors burned out with sharp electrical pops. The power distribution network sparked and died, plunging multiple compartments into darkness. Only the medical bay maintained steady power through its dedicated backup supply. "Medical bay stable," Zoe transmitted. "Lyra's scaffold integration continues." Rapid response interceptors deployed from the border patrol cruisers, establishing a defensive perimeter around the processor. Their weapon systems remained powered but inactive as they circled the massive vehicle. An all-terrain transport approached from the research outpost, its specialized medical equipment visible through armored viewport panels. The vehicle's transponder identified it as belonging to Dr. Marcus Taylor's team. The medical computer chimed with an urgent update. The resonant crystals in Lyra's scaffold showed signs of natural propagation. Microscopic crystalline tendrils extended into her damaged tissues, forming delicate connections. "Integration probability at 73%, the computer announced. Estimated 12 hours required for complete biological merger. Charles initiated emergency shutdown procedures across all non-essential systems. The processor's massive form settled into the desert sand as its remaining functional systems went dark. Heat warnings flashed from multiple overloaded components. Emergency coolant circulated through damaged conduits, fighting to prevent secondary system failures. The Ventaxian ships broadcast on all frequencies. "Release our citizens immediately. We demand immediate medical evacuation." Commander Sullivan's voice cut through the competing transmissions. "This is a restricted zone. Any attempt to breach the perimeter will be considered hostile action." Dr. Taylor's transport halted at the edge of the military cordon. "We have specialized crystalline life support equipment. Let us through to stabilize the patients." Charles monitored the medical bay's power levels while assessing their options. The processor's remaining functional sensors painted a clear picture of their situation trapped between opposing military forces while managing failing systems and critical patients. The sandstorm's diminished intensity revealed the full scope of their predicament, with armed vessels above and ground forces converging on their position. The medical bay's dedicated power supply showed 12 hours of capacity remaining. Lyra's crystalline scaffold pulsed with new growth, the integration process accelerating as natural biological processes merged with the artificial support structure. In her cooling pod, Zoe's vital signs remained steady but required constant environmental control to prevent degradation. Heat continued building in the processor's damaged systems. The coolant network struggled to maintain safe temperatures as more components exceeded design tolerances. Warning indicators tracked the cascade of system failures spreading through the massive vehicle's infrastructure. Medical status critical, the computer announced. External power source required within 11 hours, 4 to 7 minutes. A sleek ground vehicle approached from the research outpost's direction, its white hull emblazoned with medical insignias. Chief Medical Officer Elena Rossi emerged, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical knot as she assessed the situation. Doctor Taylor exited behind her, arms full of portable diagnostic equipment. "This is CMO Rossi," her calm voice cut through the tense radio chatter. "I'm initiating emergency medical protocols under Section 7 of the Xenobiological Care Act. All forces stand down and establish a medical corridor immediately." The Border Patrol interceptors adjusted their formation, creating a clear path to the processor while maintaining their defensive screen. Commander Sullivan's voice crackled over the comm. "Medical corridor established. Be advised any deviation from the designated route will result in immediate intervention." Charles transmitted the medical bay's status to Dr. Rossi's secure channel. The data stream displayed Lyra's crystal scaffold readings, showing remarkable resonance patterns as the artificial structure merged with her natural matrix. Zoe's vital signs followed, her improved condition evident in the stabilizing biological markers. "Power failure imminent in primary medical systems," the computer warned. 1 hour, 4 to 7 minutes remaining. Dr. Taylor's team deployed portable generators around the processor's medical bay access hatch. Power cables snaked through the sand as technicians established backup connections to critical life support systems. The familiar hum of charging capacitors filled the air as the new power supply came online. "Medical containment unit ready, Dr. Taylor announced, monitoring the crystalline resonance displays. Environmental parameters matched to processor specifications, beginning patient transfer sequence. The research team moved Zoe first. Medical technicians maintained precise temperature control as they disconnected her support systems. The mobile unit's advanced cooling system engaged automatically as they transferred her, crystal structure gleaming under the medical bay's lights. Lyra's condition demanded more delicate handling. Dr. Taylor adjusted the containment field's resonance frequency, matching the precise harmonics supporting her damaged areas. The scaffold's integration continued uninterrupted as they prepared for movement. "Crystal lattice showing unprecedented growth patterns," Dr. Taylor observed, studying the microscopic scanner readouts. "The natural propagation rate exceeds all previous recorded cases." Charles transferred his complete medical logs to the research team's database. The data included detailed recordings of the crystal treatment's effects, environmental parameters, and biological responses throughout the rescue operation. The processor's hull creaked ominously. Structural sensors detected new stress fractures spreading through the main support frames. The massive vehicle settled deeper into the desert sand as internal supports continued to fail. "Transfer speed is critical," Dr. Rossi directed. "This structure won't hold much longer." Above, the Ventaxian ships adjusted their orbit, moving to higher altitudes while maintaining sensor contact with their citizens. Their weapons remained powered down, a silent acknowledgement of the medical team's authority. Medical technicians initiated Lyra's transfer, carefully monitoring the scaffold's molecular binding field for any signs of instability. The containment unit's crystal resonance field synchronized perfectly, maintaining the delicate healing process as they moved her. The processor's remaining systems flickered as power fluctuated through damaged circuits. Emergency lighting cast harsh shadows across the medical bay while the team worked. Charles monitored the transfer from his station, tracking every minor variation in the patient's vital signs. Dr. Rossi coordinated with the research transport's medical systems, ensuring seamless integration of life support functions. The vehicle's specialized equipment adapted automatically to maintain optimal conditions for crystalline-based life forms. First patient secure, a technician reported as Zoe's containment unit locked into place aboard the transport. Environmental systems nominal. The processor's frame shuddered. Metal groaned as new fractures appeared in the main support structure. Warning indicators flashed across the engineering displays as more systems approached critical failure. Dr. Taylor focused on Lyra's transfer, his hands steady as he adjusted the containment field's properties. The scaffold's resonance patterns remained stable, crystal growth continuing uninterrupted as they moved her toward the transport. Maintaining field coherence, he reported. Integration process still active at cellular level. The research transport's medical bay hummed with activity as the team secured both patients. Advanced monitoring systems tracked every aspect of their condition, while the specialized environmental controls maintained perfect stability. Charles transmitted the final medical data before shutting down the processor's remaining systems. The massive vehicle's operational core went dark as power redirected to the research team's equipment. Only the sound of failing structural supports broke the sudden silence. A sharp alarm cut through the silence as warning indicators flashed across the research transport's medical displays. The crystal resonance field generators fluctuated wildly, their power output graphs showing dangerous spikes. Field instability detected, Dr. Taylor announced, his fingers racing across the control panel. The cavern crystals are generating resonance patterns beyond our containment parameters. Charles transmitted the processor's current medical data to Dr. Taylor's station. Natural crystal propagation rate exceeds standard medical projections by 47%. The transport's containment units whined as their regulatory systems struggled to compensate. Power surged through overloaded circuits, forcing an automatic shutdown of the primary transfer systems. Dr. Rossi pulled up detailed scanner readings. Transfer halted. We need to recalibrate the entire containment array before proceeding. A thunderous crack echoed through the processor's hull. Metal support beams twisted as new fractures appeared in the medical bay's ceiling. The structural integrity display dropped to 23% as more systems approached critical failure. Charles activated the processor's remaining functional systems. Emergency support braces extended from recessed wall panels, their hydraulic pistons straining as they fought to reinforce the buckling structure. Power reserves dwindled with each new brace deployment. Structural reinforcement engaged, he reported. Estimates show 7 minutes until complete power loss. Dr. Taylor studied the resonance patterns generated by the cavern crystals. These formations are unlike anything in our database. The molecular structure allows for significantly more efficient energy transmission. We need an alternative transfer method, Dr. Rossi stated. She gestured to her medical team. Deploy the portable field generators. We'll create a series of overlapping containment zones between vehicles. The research team moved with practiced efficiency. They positioned compact field emitters in a precise line, each device calibrated to maintain the exact environmental conditions needed for crystal stability. Modified atmospheric processing units from their transport provided additional power and temperature control. Above, new sensor contacts appeared as a sleek diplomatic vessel entered the atmosphere. Its distinctive architecture marked it as Ventaxian construction. Incoming transmission, Commander Sullivan announced. Senior Administrator Kral Voss of the Ventaxian Science Ministry requests immediate landing clearance. The medical bay's monitoring system chimed with an urgent update. The resonant crystal scaffold supporting Lyra's damaged structure showed signs of permanent molecular bonding. Microscopic tendrils of natural crystal growth intertwined with the artificial framework. Integration rate accelerating, the computer reported. Estimated 6 hours required for complete structural merger. Charles transferred the crystal integration protocols to Dr. Taylor's station. The cavern crystal's unique properties might solve your power regulation issues. Dr. Taylor analyzed the data, his expression brightening. Of course, we can incorporate these crystals directly into our life support matrix. The natural resonance patterns would stabilize the entire system. The processor's hull groaned as another support beam failed. Hairline cracks appeared in the medical bay's environmental seals, sending temperature warnings across all displays. The reinforcement braces creaked under the increasing structural load. Medical bay integrity at 19%, Charles transmitted. Environmental systems failing. Dr. Rossi motioned her team into position. Begin Zoe's transfer. Activate containment corridor. The portable field generators hummed to life, creating a protected pathway between vehicles. Each emitter maintained precise resonance levels as the medical team moved Zoe's containment unit through the sequence of overlapping fields. Her vital signs remained steady, crystal structure, continuing its natural regeneration process. First patient secure, Dr. Taylor confirmed as Zoe's pod locked into place aboard the transport. Beginning final modifications for Lyra's transfer. The research team integrated salvaged cavern crystals into their medical bay's power distribution network. The natural formations pulsed with energy, their molecular structure perfectly aligned with the artificial systems. Administrator Voss's shuttle descended through the security perimeter, touching down beyond the medical corridor. Its crystal-reinforced hull reflected the desert sunlight as diplomatic indicators flashed across its surface. The processor's medical bay creaked ominously. Support braces bent under increasing pressure as more structural elements failed. Charles diverted the last emergency power reserves to maintaining critical systems, watching as non-essential displays went dark one by one. Dr. Taylor completed the transport's crystal integration upgrades. Medical bay recalibrated, ready for final patient transfer. The research team positioned Lyra's containment unit at the corridor's entrance. Her scaffold pulsed steadily, the integration process continuing as they prepared to move her through the sequence of protective fields. Time grew short as the processor's systems approached total failure around them. Administrator Voss emerged from his shuttle, his crystalline form catching the sunlight as he strode toward the medical perimeter. His arrival marked the beginning of diplomatic complications that would follow the unauthorized rescue mission. For now, though, all attention focused on completing Lyra's transfer before the processor's remaining systems failed completely. Medical technicians activated the containment corridor's field generators in sequence. The overlapping barriers hummed to life, creating a protected pathway through which they could transport Lyra's crystalline form. Dr. Taylor adjusted the final resonance frequencies as the team positioned her containment unit. A thunderous crack split the air. The processor's medical bay floor tilted sharply, sending loose equipment sliding toward the far wall. Emergency supports groaned under the increasing structural load. Beginning transfer, Dr. Taylor announced, his hands steady on the controls despite the unstable flooring. Maintain field coherence at all costs. 2 Ventaxian figures emerged from Administrator Voss's shuttle, their crystalline forms catching the desert sunlight. Dr. Thex Nar and Dr. Myra Venn carried specialized medical equipment, its sleek design distinctly alien compared to the human technology surrounding them. "We bring resonance stabilizers from the homeworld," Dr. Nar stated, moving quickly to integrate their equipment with the transport systems, designed specifically for severe structural trauma. The processor's main power grid failed with a cascading series of electrical pops. Emergency lighting flickered as backup systems engaged. Charles's fingers flew across his control panel, redirecting power from non-critical systems. "Diverting all remaining energy to containment fields," he transmitted. "Life support and artificial gravity disabled. Doctor." Then connected the Ventaxian medical devices to the transport's power supply. The cavern crystals pulsed with renewed energy as both technologies synchronized, creating a hybrid system that strengthened the containment corridor's protective fields. Administrator Voss studied the crystal formations with evident interest. "These specimens demonstrate remarkable properties. Their classification as materials of scientific importance is immediate." Commander Sullivan's comm unit chimed. "Earth Central Command grants temporary diplomatic immunity to all medical personnel involved in this operation. Ventaxian specialists have full site access." The medical bay's ceiling supports buckled. Metal screamed as entire sections began to tear free. "Doctor." Rossi activated the modified cargo handling equipment, its field generators providing additional protection as they guided Lyra's containment unit into the corridor. "Transfer at 30%, Dr. Taylor reported, monitoring the scaffold's integration patterns. "Crystal resonance maintaining stability." More of the processor's structure failed. The medical bay's floor shifted again, forcing the team to adjust their equipment's position. Charles extracted critical data from the dying computer systems while maintaining power to the essential transfer equipment. The combined human and Ventaxian medical teams worked in practice coordination. Dr. Nar's specialized instruments provided real-time analysis of Lyra's crystal structure as they moved her through the protected pathway. Dr. Venn adjusted their homeworld technology to complement the human containment fields. "Scaffold integration continues at optimal levels," Dr. Nar confirmed. "The emergency transfer protocols are proving effective." Sections of ceiling crashed down behind them as they completed the final phase of evacuation. The transport's enhanced medical bay accepted Lyra's containment pod, automatically connecting life support systems. The cavern crystals integrated throughout the equipment pulsed in harmony with her partially merged scaffold. Charles transmitted the last data packets from the processor's computers before abandoning his station. The massive vehicle's frame twisted with an ear-splitting groan as structural failures cascaded through its systems. "All personnel clear," Commander Sullivan announced. Security teams established defensive positions around the research transport while Dr. Taylor's staff secured both patients for transport. Administrator Voss approached Dr. Taylor as they prepared to depart. "Your innovative use of the cavern crystals merits further study. A joint research initiative would benefit both our species." The transport's medical monitoring systems displayed steady readings for both patients as the security teams prepared their escort formation. Behind them, the atmospheric processor's enormous bulk settled into its final collapse, marking the end of its service with a cloud of desert sand and falling debris. The research transport's engines hummed to life as Commander Sullivan coordinated their departure from the collapse site. "Escort formation Alpha 7 established," Sullivan transmitted. Above them, Ventaxian medical ships maintained precise orbital positions, their sensors tracking the convoy's progress across the desert terrain. Inside the transport's medical bay, Dr. Taylor studied the bioreadings from both containment units. The crystal-enhanced systems displayed unprecedented efficiency levels, maintaining perfect stasis conditions while drawing minimal power. Zoe's vital signs remained strong, her partially crystalline form pulsing with a steady cyan glow. In the adjacent pod, Lyra's scaffold continued its integration process, the merged structures strengthening with each passing minute. Energy consumption down 6 to 3%, Charles noted, analyzing the transport's performance data. The vehicle's environmental controls responded smoothly to the crystal modifications, dissipating heat through natural resonance patterns rather than standard cooling systems. Dr. Thexnar's instruments detected subtle changes in Lyra's crystal structure. The scaffold integration accelerates. These readings suggest activation of natural healing mechanisms, similar to emergency crystallization during severe trauma. That matches Zoe's recovery pattern, Dr. Taylor confirmed. He adjusted several monitoring parameters, tracking the regeneration process. The resonant crystals aren't just supporting damaged areas, they're stimulating repair at the molecular level. Administrator Voss's comm unit chimed with an incoming priority signal. The crystalline diplomat moved to a private alcove, reviewing data from the Ventaxian Science Council. His faceted features shifted as he processed the information. Charles's workstation displayed new geological survey results compiled from the processor's final sensor logs. Multiple crystal formation signatures detected within 50 kilometers. The deposits appear to follow underground thermal vents. Dr. Venn integrated the survey data with Ventaxian geological archives. These formations share characteristics with healing crystals found in ancient growth chambers. Their natural resonance frequencies align perfectly with our species' crystalline structure. The transport's forward sensors registered a massive pressure system building behind their position. Dark clouds roiled on the horizon, carrying abrasive sand particles that would tear through standard vehicle shielding. Category 4, storm approaching from bearing 173, the navigation computer announced. Projected intercept in 4 to 7 minutes at current speed. Sullivan's security teams tightened their escort pattern. Standard route to Outpost 47 blocked by storm front, calculating alternate course through the magma fields. Dr. Taylor's staff moved quickly to reinforce the medical base systems. They installed additional crystal resonators throughout the containment field generators, creating overlapping layers of protection against the rough terrain ahead. Shield modifications complete, Dr. Nar reported. The transport's defensive screens shimmed with new energy patterns as crystal-enhanced heat dissipation circuits activated. Thermal protection increased by 37%. The convoy altered course, heading toward a region where recent geological activity had twisted the desert landscape into treacherous configurations. Cooling magma channels created unstable ground conditions, requiring precise navigation between safe zones. First fissure field ahead, Sullivan transmitted. Maintain tight formation and follow the plotted course exactly. Administrator Voss approached Dr. Taylor's station, his crystalline form catching the medical bay's light. The Science Council recognizes this site's significance. They propose immediate collaboration between our research teams. The transport's deck plates vibrated as they crossed onto the unstable terrain. Scanners mapped safe passages between cooling magma tubes, while the crystal-enhanced shields deflected waves of heat rising from beneath the surface. Behind them, the storm front continued its rapid approach, its leading edge already obscuring the horizon. Charles tracked the expanding crystal growth patterns in both patients' containment units. Integration rates holding steady despite environmental interference. The resonant fields are maintaining perfect stability. Dr. Venn's instruments detected minute variations in the ground ahead. Magma tube network shows signs of recent movement. We must adjust our course 2 degrees starboard to maintain optimal structural support. The security escort shifted position, guiding the transport through the increasingly hazardous terrain. Above, Ventaxian ships maintained their observation positions, their sensors providing additional data about the approaching storm system. The medical bay's crystal-enhanced systems pulsed with steady energy as they continued their journey toward Outpost 47. Every screen showed stable readings for both patients, while the research team compiled their preliminary findings. Administrator Voss began documenting protocols for the proposed joint initiative, his digits moving rapidly across the holographic interface as the transport pressed onward through the treacherous landscape. The transport's sensors registered increasing seismic activity beneath their position. Ground-penetrating radar displayed a network of hollow spaces threading through the cooling magma tube's natural caverns expanded by recent geological shifts. Multiple structural anomalies detected, Charles announced, his display filling with warning indicators. Surface integrity decreasing rapidly. The deck plates shuddered as hairline cracks appeared in the terrain ahead. Commander Sullivan's lead vehicle probed each section of ground before signaling the convoy forward, its specialized sensors mapping safe passages between the unstable zones. Incoming transmission from Outpost 47, the communications officer reported. Chief Engineer Walsh requests immediate data upload. The transport's medical bay registered subtle changes in both patients' readings. Dr. Taylor adjusted his monitoring equipment, tracking an unexpected energy pattern flowing between the two containment units. Crystal resonance synchronizing between patients, Dr. Narr observed. His instruments displayed complex harmonic patterns. Lyra's scaffold integration rate has increased by 23%. Dr. Venn moved to examine Zoe's readings. Her stabilized crystal structure appears to be amplifying the natural healing frequencies. This interaction was previously undocumented. The deck lurched sharply as a section of ground collapsed nearby. Warning klaxons sounded throughout the transport as its stabilizers fought to maintain level positioning. Chief Engineer Walsh's voice cut through the command channel. Initiating shield harmonic modifications now, routing crystal resonance patterns through the main deflector array. Charles's workstation displayed the new shield configurations. The transport's protection fields shifted frequency, incorporating the crystal's natural energy dissipation properties. Surface temperature readings dropped as the enhanced shields deflected waves of heat more efficiently. Visibility decreasing, Sullivan transmitted. Storm front approaching faster than projected. Sensor range down to 60%. The leading edge of the sandstorm painted the horizon in shades of rust and amber. Wind-driven particles rattled against the transport's modified shields, testing the new harmonics. Walsh's engineering team monitored power consumption levels as the crystal-enhanced systems adjusted automatically to the increasing particle density. A deep rumble emanated from beneath the surface. The transport's radar display showed a massive cavity forming directly ahead, its edges expanding as underground supports failed. Sinkhole developing, Charles reported. Calculating safe routes now. Dr. Taylor's staff moved quickly to reinforce the medical bay's crystal network. They positioned additional resonators around both containment units, creating overlapping fields of stability. The patient's synchronized healing patterns continued uninterrupted despite the vehicle's movement. Alternative route identified, Sullivan announced, adding 4 to 7 minutes to arrival time. Administrator Voss received new data from the orbiting Ventaxian vessels. Storm intensity exceeds all previous measurements. These conditions will overwhelm standard shield configurations. Walsh's voice carried an edge of urgency. Implementing full crystal integration protocols, establishing resonant node network throughout the transport's superstructure. Charles adapted the processor rescue protocols, linking the crystal nodes into the transport's structural support systems. Real-time stress data flowed across his display as the enhanced framework distributed impact forces naturally. The medical bay's screens showed steady progress in both patients' recovery. Zoe's cyan glow pulsed in perfect rhythm with Lyra's scaffold integration patterns. Dr. NAR's instruments tracked the energy exchange between them, mapping previously unknown aspects of Ventaxian biological capabilities. Storm front accelerating, Sullivan transmitted. Security escort vehicles cannot withstand peak conditions without crystal enhancement. The transport approached the divergence point between routes. Ahead, the massive sinkhole continued expanding, its edges crumbling into the unstable cavity network below. To the right, a longer but more stable path led around the worst of the geological damage. Walsh's crystal-enhanced sensors probed both routes, mapping structural weaknesses and potential failure points. The direct path offered significant time savings, but required precise weight distribution to prevent triggering additional collapses. The longer route provided better stability but would force them to face the storm's full intensity. Decision point in 30 seconds, Charles announced. The transport systems awaited input while continuing to process new data from the rapidly changing conditions around them. Implementing crystal resonance modification, Walsh transmitted. His engineering team activated a network of crystalline nodes along the transport's undercarriage. Ground penetration sensors recalibrated. We can take the direct route. The transport sensors mapped a complex web of subsurface features. Charles's display showed real-time stability calculations as Walsh's modifications improved detection accuracy by an order of magnitude. Security teams, diamond formation, Sullivan ordered. The escort vehicles shifted position, their shield harmonics synchronizing with the transport's enhanced protection field. Deploying ground anchors. Dr. Taylor observed new energy patterns flowing through the medical bay's monitoring systems. The transport's structural crystals created unexpected resonance with both patients' healing matrices. Integration rate increasing, Dr. Nar reported, adjusting his instruments. The vehicle's crystal network amplifies our medical frequencies. Zoe's containment unit pulsed with intensified cyan light. Lyra's scaffold absorbed the enhanced resonance, acceleration her recovery. Dr. Ven's readings showed an 82% improvement in integration efficiency. The deck vibrated as Sullivan's lead vehicle launched stabilization anchors into the unstable terrain. Crystalline spikes penetrated the surface, creating reinforced paths for the transport's massive wheels. Outpost 47 deploying engineering support, Charles announced. His screens showed heavy vehicles emerging from the facility's protective walls. Director Harrison's teams are stabilizing our final approach. Modified mining lasers swept the desert surface ahead. The beams partially fused the unstable ground, creating a hardened track wide enough for the transport convoy. Wind speeds climbed past 180 kilometers per hour. Sand particles bombarded the crystal-enhanced shields, testing the new resonance patterns. The escort vehicle's standard protection systems struggled against the intensifying storm. Power consumption stable, Walsh transmitted. Crystal network maintaining 97% efficiency. The transport sensors detected a critical anomaly ahead. Charles's display highlighted a massive underground cavity filled with superheated magma. Implementing weight displacement field, Walsh announced. The crystal network reconfigured, spreading the transport's mass across a wider area. Power indicators fluctuated as the system adjusted. Ground pressure dropped by 4 to 7%. The transport crossed the weakened section as underlying support structures groaned. Escort vehicles followed precisely in its wake, taking advantage of the temporarily reinforced terrain. Seismic tremors rippled through the landscape. Surface collapses created an ever-narrowing corridor between unstable zones. The transport's enhanced detection system provided crucial warnings, allowing Sullivan's team to thread between dangerous areas. Final approach corridor stabilization at 60%, Director Harrison transmitted. Engineering units working to reinforce remaining sections. Dr. Taylor documented the unprecedented medical readings. The resonant crystal network had created perfect healing conditions despite the hazardous journey. Lyra's scaffold integration accelerated beyond theoretical limits, while Zoe's restored crystalline structure gained strength. Multiple surface breaches detected, Charles reported. His screens showed new fissures opening around the convoy. Adjusting course through remaining stable zones. The outpost's massive walls loomed ahead through the storm's amber haze. Engineering vehicles continued their methodical surface reinforcement, racing to complete the final approach path before conditions deteriorated further. Medical bay preparing for patient transfer. Dr. Nar transmitted to the outpost's waiting medical team. Crystal resonance patterns logged for replication. The transport's enhanced shields deflected another brutal wave of wind-driven particles. Behind them, the storm front towered into the stratosphere, its leading edge already overtaking the convoy's position. Sullivan's escort vehicles pressed closer, sheltering in the transport's stronger protection field as they approached the outpost's reinforced perimeter. Entrance. The transport's reinforced shields flickered with crystalline energy as they crossed the final stretch of stabilized ground. Director Harrison's engineering teams completed their surface fusion passes, the modified mining lasers creating a gleaming path of partially vitrified sand leading directly to the medical bay doors. Outpost shield harmonics incompatible with crystal resonance, Walsh transmitted, his diagnostics highlighting critical frequency mismatches. Initiating emergency modifications to prevent interference patterns. Engineering crews emerged from the outpost's maintenance access points, carrying spare resonant crystals harvested during the rescue operation. They worked methodically around the perimeter of the medical bay, integrating the crystals into the facility's shield generators. Security Chief Kane's tactical teams deployed additional shield projectors, their armored forms barely visible through the intensifying storm. Transfer corridor established, Kane reported. Shield harmonics matched to transport specifications. Warning indicators flashed across the outpost's primary control interfaces. The facility's fusion reactor strained against the combined power draw of the enhanced defensive systems and specialized containment fields. Reactor at 93%, Harrison announced. Unable to maintain current shield configuration without additional power, Walsh's hands flew across his engineering console, implementing crystal-enhanced power transfer. Routing excess capacity from transport systems. Modified power conduits extended from the transport's undercarriage, connecting to the outpost's primary distribution network. Energy readings stabilized as the crystal network optimized power flow between the integrated systems. Inside the outpost's medical bay, Senior Technician Martinez directed his preparation team. They positioned salvaged crystals throughout the primary treatment chamber, carefully replicating the resonance patterns from the transport's successful configuration. Treatment chamber modifications complete, Martinez transmitted. Life support systems upgraded with crystal integration. The transport's medical bay registered new changes in both patients' conditions. Dr. Taylor adjusted his monitoring equipment, tracking the unexpected crystal growth patterns forming within the containment units. Natural lattice structures developing, Dr. Taylor reported. Crystal formations mirror Ventaxian biological patterns perfectly. Dr. Nar examined the readings. These structures could revolutionize our understanding of crystal-based medical applications. Administrator Voss received updated telemetry from the Ventaxian ships above. Their sensors tracked the storm's interaction with residual energy signatures rising from the collapsed cavern network. Storm system feeding off underground energy emissions, Voss announced. Projected duration, minimum 18 hours at current intensity. The outpost's modified shields hummed with increasing power as wind speeds topped 200 kilometers per hour. Crystalline energy patterns rippled through the reinforced barrier, deflecting waves of superheated particles. Transfer corridor integrity holding, Kane reported. His security teams maintained their positions around the medical bay entrance, monitoring the integrated human Ventaxian defense systems. Martinez's team finalized the specialized containment units in the Outpost's research wing. Advanced monitoring systems online, ready to begin detailed analysis of crystal lattice development. The transport systems registered another spike in resonant energy as the patient's crystal patterns continued evolving. Dr. Taylor documented the unprecedented readings while preparing for the critical transfer procedure. Initiating power distribution protocols, Walsh transmitted. His crystal-enhanced network balanced the increasing energy demands across both facilities' systems. Ready to maintain stability during patient transfer. The storm's intensity peaked as the final preparations concluded. Sand particles accelerated by maximum wind speeds tested the enhanced shields, creating sheets of crystalline light where they impacted the reinforced barriers. Inside the protected corridor, medical teams waited to begin the delicate process of moving both Ventaxian patients to their new containment units. Transfer team in position, Dr. Taylor announced, observing the final shield harmonics stabilize between the transport and outpost. Beginning containment unit extraction. The anti-gravity stabilizers whined as the medical team guided Zoe's crystal-enhanced pod through the reinforced corridor. Halfway to the outpost entrance, warning indicators flashed across the containment unit's control interface. Stabilizer misalignment detected, Martinez transmitted. Crystal resonance causing frequency disruption. Dr. Taylor accessed the unit's auxiliary controls. Implementing emergency modification. He extracted resonant crystals from his equipment kit, integrating them into precise positions around the stabilizer array. The containment pod's levitation field smoothed as the new crystals corrected the harmonic imbalance. Kane's security feeds highlighted electromagnetic anomalies sweeping through the storm wall. Communications degrading, he reported. Signal strength down 40%. Security teams deployed mobile crystal-enhanced boosters at strategic points around the transfer corridor. The devices activated, projecting localized fields that stabilized the outpost's communication channels. Orbital telemetry restored. Administrator Voss confirmed from the newly established command center. Ventaxian vessels maintaining contact through enhanced relay network. Chief Structural Engineer Blackwood's sensors detected concerning vibrations throughout the medical bay walls. Crystal resonance creating structural stress patterns, he transmitted. Installing dampening supports at critical junctions. His engineering crews positioned modified crystal arrays throughout the medical section. The dampeners activated, creating counter-resonance fields that stabilized the facility's framework. Dr. Nar's instruments tracked unprecedented changes in Lyra's recovery metrics as her containment unit passed through overlapping crystal fields. Integration rate exceeding previous parameters, he announced. Cellular reconstruction accelerated by 94%. The outpost's power grid fluctuated as shield impacts intensified. Crystalline barriers flared with each debris strike, drawing massive energy from the straining fusion reactor. Implementing auxiliary power network, Walsh transmitted. His teams integrated salvaged transport crystals into secondary distribution nodes. Redirecting load through crystal-enhanced conduits. The facility's energy readings stabilized as the new grid activated. Power flowed smoothly between systems, maintaining critical operations despite the increasing environmental stress. A massive debris impact rattled the transfer corridor's shields. The crystalline barrier held, but power consumption spiked dangerously. Shield integrity maintained, Kane reported, adjusting crystal resonance to compensate for impact stress. Both containment units reached the outpost's modified medical bay. Martinez's team guided them into position within the enhanced treatment chamber, crystal arrays automatically synchronizing with the patient's existing healing matrices. "Transfer complete," Dr. Taylor announced. All medical systems operating at optimal efficiency. The Outpost sensors track the storm's intensifying electromagnetic properties. Director Harrison studied the orbital data feeds, coordinating with engineering teams to maintain stable power distribution under the evolving conditions. Through the reinforced observation windows, sheets of crystal-enhanced energy rippled across the Outpost shields. The facility's integrated human and Ventaxian systems worked in concert, protecting its occupants from the savage environment beyond, while maintaining the delicate healing conditions within. Temperature warnings flashed across Walsh's monitoring display. The crystalline fields enveloping the medical bay generated intense thermal patterns, their resonance frequencies interacting with the Outpost's power systems in unexpected ways. "Medical bay temperature rising," Walsh transmitted. "Crystal arrays creating localized heat buildup." His fingers danced across the engineering console, redirecting power through alternate conduits. Dr. Taylor observed new data streams from the patient monitoring systems. "Temperature variance affecting crystal integration rates. We need those cooling systems online." Engineering teams extracted atmospheric processors from the transport vehicle, modifying their components with crystal-enhanced regulators. The salvaged units hummed to life, projecting waves of cooled air throughout the medical section. A deep vibration shook the facility as the primary fusion reactor approached thermal limits. Backup power systems engaged automatically, their crystal-enhanced circuits maintaining stable energy flow to critical systems. "Transferring Lyra's pod to Isolation Chamber 3, Dr. Taylor announced. Medical technicians guided the containment unit through reinforced corridors into a specially constructed room. Triple arrays of stabilization crystals activated, their frequencies precisely tuned to maintain optimal healing conditions. Security feeds displayed multiple impact sites along the Outpost's outer walls. "Perimeter breaches detected in sectors 7 through 12, Kane reported. He deployed a squadron of modified repair drones, their crystal sensors penetrating the storm's interference. "Structural instability detected," Blackwood transmitted from the northwest quadrant. His scanners highlighted stress fractures spreading through a main support column. "Crystal resonance threatening primary medical bay support." Engineering crews installed latticed crystal matrices throughout the compromised section. The reinforcement network redistributed structural loads, stabilizing the weakened column as monitoring systems tracked harmonic stress levels. Dr. Sarah Cooper burst into the Environmental Control Center, her equipment cases filled with modified crystal arrays. Atmospheric pressure differentials exceeding safety margins. She integrated resonant crystals into the air handling systems, stabilizing the erratic pressure fluctuations threatening the medical section. The storm intensified beyond the Outpost shield parameters. Administrator Voss analyzed data from orbiting Ventaxian vessels, tracking dangerous energy patterns in the crystal-saturated clouds. "Storm system generating amplified electromagnetic pulses," Voss transmitted. "Shield harmonics requiring continuous adjustment." Walsh's team constructed a secondary power hub using transport components and modified crystals. The auxiliary system powered vital medical equipment while reducing strain on the main grid. Crystal-enhanced cooling units activated throughout the power network, preventing thermal cascade failures. Dr. Taylor documented unprecedented healing progress in both patients. Lyra's scaffold stability at 89%. Crystal resonance patterns accelerating cellular reconstruction. Research technicians recorded the successful frequency combinations, developing new protocols for crystal-enhanced medical treatments. The data streamed to secure storage arrays as the storm's interference increased. Shield integrity compromised in Section 14, Kane announced. Repair drones swarmed the affected area, installing additional support structures beneath the weakened barrier. Cooper's atmospheric systems maintained stable conditions despite the crystal field's increasing influence. Modified air handlers projected precise temperature and pressure gradients throughout the medical bay. Storm duration extending beyond initial estimates, Voss reported from the command center. Crystal saturation levels still rising. Walsh monitored the new power distribution network as it handled the growing energy demands. Crystal-enhanced cooling systems prevented thermal buildup while maintaining optimal resonance frequencies for the patient's treatment. The facility's reinforced walls creaked under the storm's assault. Through armored observation ports, crystals suspended in the violent atmosphere created sheets of electromagnetic energy, testing the limits of the outpost's enhanced defenses. Initiating long-term treatment protocols, Dr. Taylor transmitted. His team prepared additional crystal arrays and medical supplies as the storm showed no signs of weakening. The outpost's integrated systems continued their delicate balance of power, pressure, and resonance, while the Ventaxian healing processes accelerated within their carefully maintained environments. Warning indicators flashed across multiple control stations as 3 primary crystal arrays in the medical bay synchronized without warning. The resonant frequencies amplified each other, creating waves of energy that rippled through the outpost's power grid. Critical power fluctuation detected, Walsh transmitted, his fingers flying across engineering controls. Crystal resonance exceeding containment parameters. His monitoring equipment registered dangerous spikes approaching system tolerance limits. Engineering teams deployed mobile power regulation units, redirecting energy through auxiliary circuits to prevent cascading overload. In Lyra's isolation chamber, Dr. Taylor observed unprecedented changes in the healing metrics. Crystal scaffold integration accelerating, he announced, documenting the complex geometric patterns forming in the surrounding arrays. Integration rate at 95%. The medical team's instruments tracked the spontaneous formation of intricate crystalline structures that enhanced the recovery process. Dr. Taylor extracted samples from the modified arrays, analyzing the precise conditions that created the beneficial resonance. Structural anomalies detected, Blackwood transmitted from the facility's outer sections. His scanners revealed microscopic crystal growth spreading through standard construction materials. Crystal formation compromising wall integrity in sections 3 through 8. Engineering crews installed modified dampening units along affected support structures. The devices projected calibrated interference fields, disrupting crystal formation while maintaining structural stability. Kane's perimeter sensors pierced the storm's electromagnetic interference. Vehicle approaching from southeast quadrant, he reported. Crawler transport heavily modified, detecting crystal-enhanced shield signature. The reinforced gates cycled open as the crawler entered the outpost's protective barrier. Dr. James Wright emerged from the vehicle's armored cabin, carrying cases of specialized crystal analysis equipment. Crystal particulate concentration increasing, Cooper announced from environmental control. Her monitors showed standard filtration systems struggling against the crystalline contamination, implementing resonant capture protocols. Her team integrated modified crystal arrays into the air handling network. The new filters activated, creating precise energy fields that trapped and neutralized dangerous particles before they penetrated critical systems. Walsh's power management console displayed alarming patterns developing between the medical bay's arrays and the storm's suspended crystals. Secondary resonance detected, he transmitted. Risk of system overload if patterns synchronize. Engineering teams constructed emergency dampening fields around vital power nodes. The modified crystals projected calibrated interference waves, preventing dangerous harmonic alignment while maintaining essential power distribution. Data received from orbital platforms, Administrator Voss announced. Storm system showing signs of self-sustaining crystal matrix formation. Expected duration now measured in weeks rather than days. Dr. Wright unpacked advanced scanning equipment in the research lab, analyzing samples from multiple crystal formations. The interaction between natural and artificial matrices creates unique energy patterns, he explained, studying complex holographic models. Standard containment protocols won't be sufficient for extended operation. The Outpost's enhanced shields flickered as new crystal formations in the storm walls created unexpected resonance patterns. Kane's security teams adjusted barrier frequencies, compensating for the evolving interference while protecting critical systems from electromagnetic surge damage. Atmospheric processors at maximum capacity, Cooper transmitted. Her modified filtration network strained against increasing crystal saturation, implementing secondary purification cycle. Crystal-enhanced air handlers maintained sterile conditions in the medical bay as particulate levels continued rising. The specialized equipment extracted contaminated air through resonant fields, breaking down crystalline structures before recycling filtered oxygen back into the facility. Dr. Taylor documented the spontaneous formation of new geometric patterns around Lyra's containment unit. The crystal scaffolds pulsed with internal energy as healing processes accelerated beyond predicted parameters. Research technicians captured detailed scans of the beneficial configurations, working to understand the precise conditions that created optimal recovery environments. Walsh's engineering teams installed additional power regulation nodes throughout the facility. The modified crystal arrays balanced increasing energy demands while preventing dangerous harmonic amplification between interlinked systems. Through reinforced observation ports, the storm's crystal-saturated clouds created sheets of electromagnetic interference that tested the outpost's enhanced defenses. Inside the protected structure, human ingenuity and modified alien technology worked in concert to maintain vital systems under increasingly hostile conditions. Dr. Wright's instruments detected complex crystalline structures developing within the facility's walls. His analysis revealed patterns matching theoretical models of self-organizing matrices, raising new questions about the interaction between artificial and natural crystal formations in high-energy environments. Dr. Wright's holographic displays shifted, revealing alarming patterns of crystal nucleation spreading through the facility's infrastructure. The growth rate exceeds all previous models, he announced, highlighting sections where crystalline structures penetrated standard construction materials. Rate of formation increased 300% in the last hour. Walsh studied the structural diagrams, his expression focused as he traced potential growth vectors across the facility's blueprint. We can use this. He activated the engineering hub's primary display, outlining a network of channels throughout the Outpost's framework. If we install modified resonance dampeners here, and here, we can direct crystal formation along reinforced paths. Engineering teams deployed through the facility, installing dampening units at critical junctures. The devices hummed to life, their frequencies precisely calibrated to guide crystal growth through predetermined channels. Walsh monitored the results on his diagnostic display as the first crystal formations began following the engineered pathways. In the medical bay, Dr. Taylor's instruments detected a sudden shift in Lyra's recovery metrics. Integration at 98%, he transmitted, studying the complex geometrical patterns forming within the crystal scaffold. These structures, they're perfect replicas of natural Ventaxian crystal matrices. His research team captured detailed scans of the unprecedented formation patterns. The artificial crystal scaffold had achieved what previous attempts failed to replicate: exact duplication of Ventaxian biological structures. Taylor extracted samples for analysis while maintaining optimal resonance frequencies around the patient. Kane's security feeds highlighted multiple vehicles approaching through the storm. Planetary Geological Survey convoy detected, he reported. 6 heavy transports, crystal-enhanced shields active. He redirected power to a series of modified barrier generators, creating a protected approach corridor through the crystal-saturated atmosphere. Dr. Cooper burst into the Environmental Control Center, her displays showing critical particulate readings. Crystal concentration in the air handling system reaching saturation point. She integrated new resonant frequency barriers into the filtration network, the specialized fields preventing crystal formation within vital circulation equipment. Pulling additional power for atmospheric processing, Cooper transmitted to engineering. The enhanced filtration system strained the facility's energy reserves, adding to the growing list of critical demands on the power grid. Blackwood's structural sensors detected unusual energy patterns beneath the facility. Massive crystal node forming under the foundation, he announced, highlighting the growing formation on the facility's subsurface scans. Interaction between storm energy and mineral deposits creating unprecedented growth patterns. His engineering team deployed stabilization equipment, utilizing Wright's latest analysis data to prevent foundation damage. The crystal node pulsed with internal energy, its structure expanding through the bedrock beneath the outpost. Walsh coordinated the installation of additional power regulation nodes, salvaging crystal technology from the transport vehicle to enhance the distribution network. Rerouting primary power through new crystal channels, he transmitted. The modified grid absorbed energy spikes from multiple emergency systems, maintaining crucial stability despite increasing demands. The facility's main gates cycled open as the Geological Survey convoy entered the outpost's protective barrier. Senior geologist Marcus Reeves emerged from the lead vehicle, directing the unloading of specialized crystal analysis equipment. Kane's security teams established a secure perimeter as the new equipment was transported to designated research areas. Administrator Voss received updated protocols from Earth Central Command, reviewing new containment procedures as crystal growth continued throughout the facility. The successful integration of Ventaxian healing techniques demonstrated significant potential, but managing the spreading formations required constant adaptation. Through reinforced observation ports, the storm's crystal-saturated clouds created sheets of electromagnetic interference. Inside the facility, Walsh's channeled crystal network glowed with controlled energy as it directed growth patterns through strengthened structural paths. The outpost systems maintained precarious balance through multiple engineering adaptations, while Reeves's team prepared to unlock new understanding of the crystal phenomena. Reeves wasted no time deploying his advanced ground-penetrating radar system. The holographic display revealed an intricate network of crystalline veins radiating outward from beneath the facility like roots of a metallic tree. These formations extend at least 2 kilometers in every direction, Reeves said, adjusting the scanning parameters. The node under the foundation acts as a central growth point, spawning new branches every few minutes. Walsh studied the complex web of crystal structures illuminated by the scan. We can use these natural channels to stabilize our power distribution. He interfaced Reeves's analysis equipment with the outpost systems, creating a real-time map of energy flows through the crystalline network. Engineering teams installed modified regulators at key intersections where crystal veins crossed the facility's power grid. The devices pulsed with controlled energy as they synchronized with the natural resonance patterns. Power fluctuations decreasing, Walsh transmitted. Crystal network accepting load distribution through new regulatory nodes. In the medical bay, Dr. Taylor's instruments detected a subtle shift in Lyra's recovery metrics. The crystal scaffold surrounding her body emanated patterns of light that perfectly matched Ventaxian biological signatures. Integration at 99.7%, Taylor announced. His display showed new growth patterns emerging spontaneously within the existing matrix. Secondary formation detected natural regeneration is starting. The medical team captured detailed scans as Lyra's crystal structure began self-repair processes similar to those observed in Zoe's recovery. Taylor adjusted the resonance fields to maintain optimal conditions for the unprecedented reconstruction. Blackwood's structural integrity sensors highlighted expanding crystal growth throughout the facility's framework, implementing contained growth protocols. His team activated newly installed resonance barriers, creating precisely controlled channels for crystal expansion. Crystal inhibitor network online, Blackwood transmitted. The modified barriers projected interference fields that guided crystal formation away from critical support structures, while allowing controlled growth through reinforced pathways. Kane's security feeds displayed unusual energy signatures emanating from the underground node. Pattern analysis indicates resonance feedback between subsurface formations and storm activity. His modified sensor arrays tracked waves of energy pulsing between the crystal network and the saturated atmosphere. Dr. Cooper initiated emergency upgrades to the atmospheric processing system. Her team integrated resonant frequency modulators into the filtration network, creating specialized fields that prevented crystal formation within vital components. Air quality stabilizing, Cooper reported. The enhanced processors hummed as they extracted crystalline particles from the facility's atmosphere, contamination levels decreasing in all sectors. In the research lab, Dr. Wright's instruments detected complex geometric patterns forming within the underground node. Energy signatures match Ventaxian medical frequencies, he said, studying the holographic models. These natural formations are replicating healing matrix configurations. Walsh supervised construction of a dedicated crystal research facility in a reinforced section of the complex. Engineering teams installed specialized containment fields designed to study controlled crystal growth without risking contamination of other systems. Research containment active, Walsh announced. The new facility incorporated successful adaptations from throughout the crisis, modified power regulators, resonance barriers, and enhanced atmospheric processors working in concert to create a safe testing environment. Reeves's geological survey team continued mapping the expanding crystal network beneath the outpost. Their seismic monitoring equipment tracked new growth patterns as crystal veins spread through the surrounding bedrock. Administrator Voss received updated directives from Earth Central Command through the facility's enhanced communications array. The successful integration of crystal technology with existing systems opened new possibilities for research and development. Through reinforced observation ports, the crystal storm raged unabated. Inside the outpost, humans worked alongside alien technology to maintain stability as they pushed the boundaries of scientific understanding. The underground crystal node pulsed with energy, its network growing ever larger beneath their feet. Reeves adjusted the scanning parameters, his expression shifting as new data streams populated his display. Multiple secondary formations detected. He highlighted a series of branching structures on the holographic map. The node network is expanding along natural fault lines. Growth rate? Walsh asked, studying the intricate web of crystal veins. Accelerating. secondary nodes forming at 2-kilometer intervals. Reeves's instruments tracked energy pulses flowing between the formations. The pattern suggests deliberate structural reinforcement. Walsh activated his engineering interface, overlaying power distribution schematics onto the geological data. These formations align perfectly with our grid architecture. He transmitted a series of calculations to his engineering team. We can install power coupling units at these intersection points. Engineering crews deployed through the facility's maintenance tunnels, carrying specialized coupling devices developed from salvaged Ventaxian technology. The units hummed to life as they connected to crystal veins, channeling natural energy into the outpost's modified systems. Power levels stabilizing, Walsh reported, monitoring the energy flow. Crystal network accepting integration protocols, switching primary systems to crystal power distribution. In the medical bay, Dr. Taylor's instruments registered completion of Lyra's crystal scaffold reconstruction. The surrounding matrix emanated patterns of light that pulsed in perfect synchronization with her natural biological rhythms. Final integration achieved, Taylor transmitted, capturing detailed scans of the unprecedented recovery. All structural damage successfully reconstructed. His team began transferring both patients to dedicated observation units equipped with specialized monitoring equipment. Kane's security feeds highlighted unusual formations in the crystalline storm, atmospheric particles displaying organized behavior. His enhanced sensors tracked cloud patterns that mirrored the geometric structures observed in medical treatment chambers. Dr. Cooper initiated emergency modifications to the atmospheric processing network. Her team installed resonant frequency modulators throughout the air handling system, creating selective barriers against crystal formation. Implementing targeted filtration protocols, Cooper announced. The enhanced processors extracted crystalline particles while maintaining optimal atmospheric conditions. Air quality parameters holding steady. Blackwood's structural analysis revealed promising locations for expanded research facilities. His construction teams began reinforcing designated sections of the complex with crystal-enhanced materials, creating specialized chambers for controlled growth experiments. Research containment systems online, Blackwood transmitted. Installing modified resonance barriers and power regulation nodes. The new installations incorporated successful adaptations from their crisis response, providing secure environments for advanced crystal studies. Dr. Wright's instruments detected complex energy patterns emanating from the underground formations. Crystal structures exhibiting unprecedented organization, he reported, studying the geometric configurations. Natural energy amplification increasing by 20% per hour. Administrator Voss received updated directives through the Enhanced Communications Array. Earth Central Command designated Outpost 47 as humanity's primary crystalline technology research center, authorizing immediate expansion of facilities and personnel. The engineering hub's displays showed steady power flow through the crystal-enhanced grid as Walsh's teams installed permanent infrastructure improvements. Kane's security network maintained constant monitoring of atmospheric formations, while Cooper's environmental systems regulated crystal growth within the facility. Through reinforced observation ports, organized patterns emerged in the crystalline storm as research teams documented the facility's transformation. The underground network continued its expansion, integrating alien technology with human innovation, as Outpost 47 evolved beyond crisis management into a new phase of scientific discovery. Reeves's ground-penetrating radar display illuminated with fresh data streams as his scanning array detected previously hidden crystal formations. The network extends far beyond our initial estimates. He adjusted the holographic projection, revealing intricate crystalline structures spreading through the desert bedrock. These formations are creating natural conduits for geothermal energy. Walsh leaned forward, studying the branching patterns. The crystal structures are self-organizing into power transmission channels. His engineering interface highlighted intense energy signatures flowing through the underground network. We can tap directly into this geothermal system. Within hours, Walsh's engineering teams deployed specialized collection units at key intersection points throughout the crystal network. The devices interfaced seamlessly with the natural formations, converting geothermal energy into usable power for the facility's expanding operations. Primary collectors operating at optimal efficiency, Walsh transmitted. The Outpost's power grid hummed as crystal-enhanced systems channeled clean energy through newly installed distribution nodes. Output exceeding projected requirements by 300%. In the medical wing, Dr. Taylor supervised construction of dedicated crystal treatment chambers, installing bioresonance field generators. His team calibrated specialized equipment designed to replicate the successful healing protocols developed during the Ventaxian recovery process. The new medical research wing took shape as construction crews installed crystal reinforced walls and specialized containment systems. Taylor's instruments tracked perfect stability in the healing matrix configurations. Treatment Chamber 1 online. Beginning calibration sequence. Administrator Voss's console displayed incoming authorization codes from Earth Central Command. The official designation scrolled across his screen, Crystal Technology Development Center, CTDC. His fingers moved across the interface, implementing new organizational protocols throughout the facility's networks. Kane directed installation of advanced sensor arrays along the outpost's expanded perimeter, deploying mobile monitoring units. His security teams positioned crystal-powered shield generators at strategic points surrounding the facility. Defense grid integration complete. The shield generators pulsed with energy as they synchronized with the underground crystal network. Kane's display showed real-time tracking of crystal formation patterns across the monitored zone. Automated response systems active. Beginning continuous surveillance cycle. Blackwood's construction teams worked efficiently, raising new research wings using crystal-enhanced building materials. Structural integrity at 100%. The reinforced frameworks incorporated dedicated crystal growth channels, allowing controlled integration of the expanding network. Implementing standardized construction protocols, Blackwood transmitted. His engineers installed precision-guided crystal formation systems throughout the new structures. Power distribution network online in sections 3 through 7. Dr. Wright's laboratory equipment detected specific frequency patterns within the crystal matrix, initiating resonance mapping sequence. His specialized sensors isolated key frequencies that influenced crystal growth rates. Beginning prototype development for portable control units. Wright's team assembled the first crystal control device, calibrating its output to match the identified frequencies. The unit projected precise resonance fields that directed crystal formation within a controlled test chamber. Growth rate modified by 30%, control parameters holding steady. In the Environmental Control Center, Dr. Cooper integrated crystal fragments into the air processing system. Crystal-enhanced filtration online. The modified units extracted atmospheric contaminants with unprecedented efficiency. Power consumption reduced by 60%. Cooper's display showed improving air quality metrics throughout the facility. Installing secondary processing nodes. Her team expanded the crystal filtration network to cover newly constructed sections of the complex. Environmental systems operating within optimal parameters. The Outpost's transformation accelerated as research teams adapted crystal technology across multiple departments. Reeves's geological surveys revealed new formation patterns, while Walsh's power collection grid expanded. Kane's security network maintained vigilant monitoring as construction crews raised additional research wings under Blackwood's supervision. Through reinforced observation ports, the crystalline storm continued its endless dance. Inside the facility, humans worked to unlock the full potential of this alien technology. The underground crystal network pulsed with steady energy, powering humanity's first major step into a new technological frontier. Age. As Reeves monitored the expanding underground formations, his instruments detected an unexpected energy signature. The pattern originated from the medical wing, pulsing in perfect synchronization with the facility's crystal network. "Dr. Taylor, are you seeing this?" Reeves transmitted the data stream to the medical lab. "The recovered Ventaxians are generating resonance patterns that match our crystal infrastructure." Taylor's medical sensors confirmed the reading. The crystal matrices in Zoe and Lyra's reconstructed tissues emanated distinct frequency patterns that influenced nearby formations. Remarkable! Their healed structures are naturally stabilizing crystal growth in adjacent chambers. Walsh arrived at the medical wing with specialized monitoring equipment. His engineering team installed precise sensors throughout the recovery area, documenting the interaction between Ventaxian biology and the facility's crystal systems. "The resonance effect extends through the entire power distribution network," Walsh observed, studying the real-time data. "Their presence actually improves crystal formation stability by 28%. The facility's main entrance activated as a sleek transport vessel landed on the reinforced pad. Colonel Richard Martinez, Earth Central Command's Crystal Technology Coordinator, emerged with a team of specialists and crates of advanced equipment. "Administrator Voss," Martinez greeted, surveying the crystal-enhanced architecture. "I've reviewed your preliminary findings. The successful integration of Ventaxian crystal healing with our technology opens unprecedented possibilities." Construction crews began immediate expansion of research facilities under Blackwood's direction. The new Crystal Integration Laboratory took shape as teams installed specialized containment systems based on successful crisis adaptations. Implementing multi-layer safety protocols, Blackwood transmitted. Modified resonance barriers created selective zones for controlled crystal growth experiments. Primary containment chamber ready for initial testing. In the medical wing, Dr. Taylor documented Zoe and Lyra's enhanced abilities. The Ventaxians demonstrated precise control over nearby crystal formations, their movements generating specific frequency patterns that influenced growth direction and stability. The crystal matrices in their reconstructed tissues act as natural resonance amplifiers, Taylor explained to Martinez. "We're establishing a joint research program to fully understand the implications." Kane's security system registered the improvements as his team integrated crystal-based sensors throughout the perimeter. Detection range increased by 400%. The enhanced network provided detailed analysis of atmospheric crystal behavior while maintaining stable containment fields. "Initiating emergency response training," Kane announced. Security teams practiced containment procedures using portable crystal dampening units developed from the successful crisis protocols. Dr. Wright's laboratory hummed with activity as his instruments isolated the specific frequencies generated by the Ventaxian patients. These natural resonance patterns could revolutionize our crystal control methods. His team assembled prototype manipulation devices calibrated to match the identified energy signatures. Walsh's engineering crews installed additional power collection nodes at strategic points throughout the underground network. Crystal-enhanced conduits channeled energy with unprecedented efficiency, creating a self-sustaining grid that powered the expanding facility. "Power output exceeding all projections," Walsh reported. The successful implementation prompted immediate plans for expanding crystal-based energy systems to other research installations. Dr. Cooper's environmental team modified the atmospheric processors with crystal filtration matrices grown under controlled conditions. The enhanced system extracted particulates while maintaining optimal air quality throughout the complex. Efficiency increased by 7 to 2%, Cooper transmitted, monitoring the improved environmental metrics. Crystal-enhanced filtration active in all sectors. Through the reinforced observation ports, the crystalline storm continued its eternal dance as research Outpost 47 evolved into Earth's premier crystal technology center. The successful partnership between human innovation and Ventaxian biology opened new frontiers in crystal manipulation and control, while the facility's expanding research programs demonstrated humanity's growing mastery of this revolutionary technology. Earth Central Command's authorization arrived within hours of Martinez's inspection. The Colonel's direct transmission outlined plans for establishing the Crystal Technology Training Academy within Outpost 47's expanding footprint. Construction begins immediately, Blackwood announced, studying the approved schematics. His crews deployed crystal-guided fabrication units along the facility's eastern quadrant. Specialized Waldo's precision-placed structural members infused with crystal matrices, creating frameworks that harmonized with the existing network. Walsh directed the installation of training chambers throughout the Academy wing, configuring containment parameters. The engineering team calibrated each growth chamber's resonance field generators, establishing stable environments for controlled crystal manipulation exercises. Safety protocols active, Walsh transmitted as the first chamber activated. Crystal formations responded to precise frequency adjustments, growing in predetermined patterns within the sealed environment. Beginning equipment calibration sequence. In the medical section, Dr. Taylor's instruments tracked unprecedented success. Crystal scaffolds assembled under controlled conditions, replicating the healing patterns observed in Zoe and Lyra's recovery. Biocompatible matrices formed within specialized containment fields, ready for emergency deployment. Portable treatment unit prototype assembled, Taylor reported. The compact device generated stable crystal matrices calibrated for biological integration. His team documented successful tissue regeneration trials using the new technology. Kane's newly formed Crystal Response Unit conducted their first training exercise in the facility's outer perimeter. Teams wielded modified detection equipment, tracking crystal formation patterns while maintaining secure containment zones. Crew Team Alpha deployed containment field. Kane observed as his operators activated portable barrier generators, creating precise resonance barriers around designated test areas, maintaining stable perimeter. Reeves's geological survey revealed extensive crystal deposits beneath the expanded facility. Multiple viable energy collection points identified. His scanning array mapped intricate formation patterns spreading through deeper rock strata. Walsh's engineering crews deployed advanced harvesting equipment at the newly discovered sites. Crystal-powered collection units extracted geothermal energy with unprecedented efficiency, feeding directly into the facility's expanded power grid. Power systems operating at peak capacity, Walsh confirmed. Energy readouts showed stable output levels supporting both research operations and academy facilities. Distribution network fully integrated. Dr. Wright's laboratory produced the first production run of portable crystal control devices, initiating field testing sequence. Research teams activated the handheld units, generating precise resonance patterns that guided crystal growth within designated zones. Formation rate adjusting to specified parameters, Wright noted as crystal structures responded to the controlled frequency emissions. The successful demonstration prompted immediate deployment to crystal management teams throughout the facility. Blackwood's construction crews installed automated monitoring systems in the new Academy wing. Crystal-enhanced sensors tracked structural integrity, while specialized subsystems managed controlled integration of growing formations. Environmental systems online. Cooper transmitted from the Atmospheric Control Center. Modified air handling units maintained optimal conditions throughout the Academy section. Crystal filtration arrays extracted particulates with remarkable efficiency, creating comfortable environments for both human and Ventaxian occupants. Through reinforced observation ports, teams watched as the new wing took shape. Crystal formations pulsed with contained energy, powering systems that would train the next generation of crystal technology specialists. The facility's transformation continued as construction crews raised additional research chambers under strict engineering controls. Walsh activated the primary training chamber's holographic interface. Crystal growth patterns responded to precise adjustments, creating stable formations within the contained environment. The successful test marked a crucial milestone in the facility's evolution from crisis management to structured education center. Beginning final calibration sequence, Walsh transmitted. His engineering team monitored power distribution across the expanded network, while safety systems maintained stable containment fields throughout the new Academy wing. The Crystal Technology Training Academy's construction proceeded with precision over the next 6 months. Walsh monitored the final power grid calibrations as teams installed sleek crystal-enhanced fixtures throughout the main ceremonial hall. Specialized environmental regulators hummed quietly, maintaining distinct atmospheric zones for the arriving Ventaxian delegation. Environmental parameters stable, Cooper transmitted from the control center. All zones show optimal readings for both human and Ventaxian physiology. The main entrance portal activated as Director Harrison stepped onto the landing pad. A gleaming Ventaxian transport descended through the swirling crystal storms, its hull adorned with the distinctive markings of the High Commissioner's office. The vessel's crystal matrix shields pulsed in harmony with the facility's defensive barriers as it touched down. High Commissioner Vex Nar emerged, his crystalline garments refracting the ambient light. Director Harrison, Outpost 47's evolution exceeds our highest expectations. His gaze swept across the facility's transformed architecture, noting the seamless integration of human and Ventaxian design elements. In the medical wing, Dr. Taylor conducted final evaluations of Zoe and Lyra's recovered crystal matrices. Structural integrity at 100%, he announced, studying the detailed scans. Natural resonance patterns fully stabilized. Lyra embraced her father as he entered the examination room. The High Commissioner's crystalline features softened as he observed his daughter's restored form. The medical sensors registered the harmonious interaction between their crystal matrices. The ceremony commenced as delegations gathered in the main hall. Chief Engineer Walsh activated a holographic display showcasing the facility's power distribution network. Crystal formations pulsed beneath their feet, channeling energy through precisely calibrated conduits. The grid now supports research installations across a 1,000-square-kilometer radius, Walsh explained. Self-sustaining crystal growth provides continuous power generation. Dr. Wright stepped forward with Zoe and Lyra. The recovered Ventaxians moved with fluid grace as they approached a specially prepared demonstration chamber. Their hands traced precise patterns in the air, generating resonance frequencies that caused crystal formations to emerge from the chamber floor. The assembled delegates watched in silence as the crystal structure took shape. Delicate spires intertwined with geometric patterns, creating a monument that captured both the precision of human engineering and the organic beauty of Ventaxian crystal art. Kane's Crystal Response Unit executed their demonstration with military precision. Teams deployed modified containment fields, their crystal-enhanced equipment responding instantly to automated threat scenarios. The operators moved through complex formations, showcasing advanced control techniques developed through months of intensive training. Administrator Voss stepped onto the presentation platform, holding commemorative crystals grown specifically for the original rescue team. These individuals faced impossible odds in the desert storms. He addressed the gathered audience. Their actions laid the foundation for everything we've achieved. Dr. Taylor guided the first class of students through the new medical training facility. Crystal healing chambers lined the walls, each calibrated to replicate emergency scenarios based on actual crisis protocols. These systems standardized treatment procedures while allowing for precise control of crystal growth rates, he explained. Zoe and Lyra moved to the front of the hall as the ceremony reached its conclusion. "We accept positions as primary instructors," Zoe announced. "Our experiences will guide future specialists in combining human innovation with Ventaxian crystal knowledge." The Academy's main training facility activated, crystal matrices pulsing with contained energy. Students from both species gathered around interactive learning stations, eager to begin their instruction in this revolutionary field. Through the reinforced observation ports, the eternal crystal storm continued its dance, no longer a threat but a reminder of the journey that transformed an isolated outpost into humanity's premier center for crystal technology development.